Board of Selectmen's meeting to order for Monday, January 7th, 2019. And as required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans on video or audio taping this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. Hearing nobody, please join me at the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Chair.
Just a note, over the weekend I saw, or actually at the end of last week, a long-time volunteer and I think somewhat a beloved person in our community passed away. Joyce Roach, who we all know, volunteered at Channel 18 for many years with the Historical Society. We could just have a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Anybody for, excuse me, weekly briefing? Carolyn.
Carolyn Kerr, the Community Center Director. I'm actually here just before you because it's been so long since we have met. I wanted to just publicly thank everyone who helped with all of our donations and drives, and it was such a successful endeavor. We were able to help the police and fire, all of the children on the mitten tree, the veterans. So I really I'm always here asking, but I wanted to make sure I got to thank everyone, from individuals who did small things to companies who did large things. Everyone was wonderful, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for making such a great effort at helping everybody. We appreciate it. Anybody else for weekly briefing?
Madam Chair, I do have something. We received over the weekend from the attorney that the bill that we had submitted for special legislation for the liquor license, the 3 different establishments, that the governor's office, it was approved at the House and the Senate, and it's on the governor's office for consideration. The governor's office was concerned because there were several edits, really just periods and such that were made. So I did leave it at your place this evening, but since the governor only has so much time to act on it, I would like to see if we could bring that up for consideration, maybe under new business or whatever. But I at least wanted to acknowledge that, and then we can point out the edits at a later time. But I guess I would ask for indulgence to have that House bill edits be reviewed and approved.
Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering how that might be. There is no town of Harwich Port. I mean, it was actually factually wrong.
I don't make up the rules. I mean, they've asked us to have you guys review it, and I don't mean to be flip, but I agree 100%. But that's what I've been asked, and they said the governor's office, legal counsel would like to make sure that the selectmen, who are the executive authority, are okay with the edits. We did put the edits in there, so if the boardroom wanted to look, new business.
Madam Chair, that's what I'm saying, is that the motion to approve the text of the legislation included, when we approved it, those edits.
The ability to make those edits.
Well, it actually specified what edits.
I think that's how they got through the House and the Senate, but now sitting on the governor's desk.
So we just need to take a vote to reaffirm what we already did.
What we already did.
With the edits that were made by the House and Senate.
Okay. So we'll take that up under new business.
Under new business.
Anybody else for weekly briefing? Richard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We just came out of our assessors meeting, and I'm here to remind people the window is now open for people who wish to file real estate tax abatements. That period is open until February 1st, and anyone who's looked at their field card needs to make any adjustments, have any concerns about their value, they have just that 1-month period to file that tax abatement.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody for public comments and announcements?
Hi, my name is Judy Wilson, and I am the daughter of Jane Bretsky of 61 Azalea Drive, and I'm seeking permission to speak on her behalf.
Actually, that's fine, but Chris, we have this at the, of our agenda as well.
It is on the agenda.
So, do you,
I can speak now or speak then, it's up to you, but I'm hoping to speak.
It's up to the boards.
it's fine, if you wanna, I would rather keep
Wait,
it all together. if
That's
you don't
fine with
mind.
me.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else for public comments and announcements? Amy? Oh, okay. Okay, we'll move on to the interviews for interim school committee members for Harwich. And we have the school committee here along with the board for our joint meeting to have the interviews. Do you have anything you want to say publicly? Do you have to call your
Hi.
meeting to order?
Terry Russell.
Donna Richardson.
Sharon Stout, and in light of what Ed mentioned earlier, I wouldn't just note that a member of our Monomoy, prior Monomoy School Committee, Glenn Bryant, passed away January 1st, and he had been a long time, he had been a 6th grade teacher in Harwich, and then a long time guidance counselor at the high school. So we're sad about that.
Thank you for mentioning that. I wasn't aware. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, do the members of the group that are up for election, up for appointment, want to come up to the table? Good evening.
Good evening.
Why don't we just have everybody introduce themselves? Do you want to start, Linda?
Sure. Linda Sabula.
Dana DeCosta, Chatham Road.
Charles Kruska, 6 T-Berry Ave.
Tina Gaines, 1 Panorama Point
Great.
Drive.
Do you want to?
So, Madam Chair, would you like me to walk through
Yeah,
the
would you?
process that we've
Thank you.
established for this evening? In an effort to try to have some continuity to this, I was asked to put together a couple of questions. I apologize in advance if they're good or bad. But we had the 4 applicants, maybe just by alphabetical is the way I did it, that each applicant will be given an opportunity to speak and answer the 3 questions. Maybe just for the record, I'll read them in. If you could keep your comments to about 5 minutes each. At the end of each one of yours, if there's any follow-up questions from any members of the joint board, that would be the opportunity, and then move to the next candidate. So under the interview process, each candidate will respond to the following 3 questions, 5 minutes in total. Question number 1, why are you interested in this position, and will you run for the position? Because obviously it's an elected position. Number 2, please describe how your background will fit with the Monomoy Regional School District Committee. And then 3, what direction and improvements do you see are needed in the system? And then I would suggest, Madam Chair, as process-wise, at the end of the section where we have the question and answer, that you would entertain motions for nominations for people to be considered. And then once, 1 vote, 1 nomination. If all 4 are nominated, then you would make a motion, or someone would make a motion to actually appoint a person to. And then pursuant to the regional agreement, someone needs to achieve a majority. So if on the first ballot, if you would, if everyone got 1 vote or 2 votes and you didn't get a majority, we'd have to continue to narrow it down from the highest vote getter to the lowest until a successful candidate is achieved.
And we'll go through each person individually.
Each person individually with the follow-ups.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, we might as well go in order.
Alphabetically.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to address these boards. Question 1, why are you interested in this position? Will you run for the position? I have a desire to serve my community. It's evidenced by my history of volunteer and elected committees, both here and in prior communities in which I lived, and to be a voice for the students and a fresh set of eyes on the issues, and yes, will run. Please describe how your background will benefit the Monomoy Regional School District School Committee. I wrote these down because it's easier for me. As you can see from my resume, I have a long-standing interest and personal involvement in youth and their access to educational and social opportunities. I strongly supported the after-school program at a Boys and Girls Club, which included certified teachers for homework help and computer skills assistance. I have an ability to look at all sides of an issue, to question and listen to the discussion, foster an in-depth, robust conversation leading to a practical answer. I have an ability to separate personal bias from the issue under discussion and support decisions that are made in the best interest of the students and of the community at large. What directions or improvements do you see are needed in the system? I can see we need to strive for balance between the need to prepare the students to successfully take their place in the community at large and balance that with the ability to fund that need by the community. We need to prepare our students with the ability to handle financial aspects of their personal lives as well as their work lives. Prepare them to take personal responsibility for life's decisions and issues. It's disheartening for me when I speak with younger folk in some of my counseling that I do, that they are running up against a lot of credit card debt and have really very limited ideas how to deal with it. I think that we do a disservice to them by glossing this over. It's a serious aspect of life, and it's kind of not solved by a tap of the phone to buy something. In this age of increased technology in the workplace and in one's personal life, we would be remiss if we focus more on technology to the detriment of the ability to solve problems and to be able to communicate effectively. I can guarantee you that 20 words in a text does not satisfy the Securities and Exchange Commission. In an ever-changing environment, the ability to learn new skills as needed and to apply existing skills to a new situation will enhance the students as they navigate life. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Dana?
Is there any follow-up?
Oh, does anyone, sorry. Any follow-up to, any board member have any follow-up questions?
For me, I'd rather wait till the end.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Dana?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As soon as I heard that Steve had resigned, I sat down and typed out my request to be considered. I knew this would be an important appointment for a short duration, and I knew you would need experienced candidates that know how government by committee works, candidates that can step right in and go to work between now and May when the voters take over again. Between now and then, there are important issues to be settled. The employees are looking for a new, fair contract now. As a former Harwich Selectman, I helped negotiate contracts for all the town employees. And as a Finance Committee member over the past 16 years, I have worked at fitting the results of employee contracts into the operating budgets. The superintendent is going in a new direction for the district's transportation needs, and the school committee will need to approve a new transportation contract. As a former supervisor for Eastern Transit, the company that supplies the buses and drivers for the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority, and as a supervisor for Cape Destinations, the current contract holder for the district, my supply side experience will help the school committee with that contract. I'll just state for the record that I do not have a school bus license and I do not drive school buses. Both of these issues will put additional pressure on an operating budget that is already exacerbated by other increases. These are the pressing needs of the district that will have to be addressed during this appointment. And my 30 years of Harwich committee experience in dealing with town budgets makes me uniquely qualified for this appointment. I think there are both short-term and long-term improvements that can be made to the system. In the short term, I know I can improve the communications between the school committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the Finance Committee. I know the two administrators talk all the time, but I think I can improve our connections. And just like I am working to improve the presentation of the town's capital plan to the voters to make it clearer and easier to understand, I know I can help improve the presentation of the Monomoy operating budget. The pressing needs of the district, along with the improving the communication and presentations of the school committee, will occupy this appointment through May. Long term, I would like to see the regional school committee broaden their horizon regionally. The town of Harwich is working regionally with Chatham, Dennis, Yarmouth, and by extension Barnstable as a wastewater solutions. And Harwich is working with Brewster and other surrounding towns on affordable housing issues. When I think of how much time, money, and effort the public schools in these towns are spending to attract a decreasing number of students, I know future meetings of the local school committees would help. This past weekend, State Representative Sarah Peak spoke in Harwich, and she made it clear to us that there will be no attempts to adjust the school aid funding formula in the upcoming session. She stated that we would have a better chance of coming up with potential solutions to problems working locally with towns around us. Smaller regional bills are having better success right now than any attempts to modify the statewide formulas. As a selectman, I learned quickly the benefits of meeting with other selectmen, which is why I emulated the bounds whenever we were asked to do that. And it's why I attend the MMA conferences. In closing, I know that I have to give up my position on the Finance Committee to take this appointment, and I can only advise you that the Finance Committee is in good shape right now with 9 members. And the Finance Committee is an advisory board. The school committee is a policy board, and you have been given this authority by the voters to make the school committee the best policy board it can be over the next 4 months. I think I am that candidate, and I would run again for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Tina Games, just in case you don't know. Why am I interested in this position? You know, I want to speak first as a satisfied customer. As a recipient of Monomoy's Excellence in Education, I have 2 kids in the school system. My son graduated in 2017, and he has learning differences. When we moved from Washington, D.C. 6.5 years ago, he was a struggling learner. He was barely hanging on to a C. When we came to Monomoy, all of that changed. The teachers we have at Monomoy are phenomenal. My experience of them are just truly phenomenal. What they did with him is helped him connect with his learning style, his learning process, and I am happy to tell you he graduated with high honors. And that, you know, is a feat in itself. My daughter's a junior at the high school. She is an AP and an honors student, so I have kids on both ends of the spectrum. And she is an athlete. She's quite involved in a lot of things over at Monomoy. And I am also very happy to tell you that as a junior, she's currently very strongly being recruited by one of the most prestigious women's colleges in the United States. That's a Monomoy success. And the reason I am here, I feel it's very important to have a Harwich voice for families at the table. I talk to families all the time. There are a lot of success stories like my own. There are also a lot of very challenging stories. And I have served in advocacy for a really long time, and I intend to be an advocate on the school committee. Coming into what I believe is going to be a very difficult budget cycle, communication is key. I have a background in communications. I know how to talk to people. I know how to pull stakeholders to the table. I know the beauty of collaboration. I'm in the community all the time, and I feel like I could be a really good bridge between the school committee and the school administration and our community. I run into people all the time that don't have kids in the school system, you know, what are you doing with our money over there? I feel like I can articulate that. You know, my background, and I will run again, so I will absolutely run for the position. Describing my background, I am a parent. I have firsthand experience of what it's like to be at Monomoy. I have firsthand knowledge. I know families, my kids. I'm an initiator. I know how to get things done. To give you an example, I'm always looking for ways to serve the community better. I started a Facebook page, Friends of Monomoy High School. We don't have a PTO at the high school, so I started a forum. It has over 500 people. It's very active. People come there to get questions, answers, to vent a little bit, to get the facts straight. It's been kind of our, you know, pseudo PTO kind of. I'm very happy about that because it brings a lot of people to the table. I mentioned I'm an advocate. I understand challenges. I work with families every day over at the CAPE Organization for the Rights of the Disabled. I'm working with families with disabilities. I know how to advocate, and I help people articulate. I've been a PTA president. I've served on commissions, I've served on councils. I know how to help people self-advocate. And that is going to be the role that I intend to play should I be appointed to this position. I have a background in PR and communications. Again, I know how to bring people to the table. I know how to get the message across. And I am very fiscally responsible. I own my own business. I know how to operate within a budget. I run grant programs. I know what it's like to have a certain amount of money and how to work it within that framework. I also know that if I'm short somewhere, I know how to go and find it. I also have a background in fundraising. I know how to get creative funding. And I'm very resourceful. So if I see a gap somewhere in a budget, you know, I can move things around. I can tap into something else. So that's the background. What direction or improvements do I see needed in the system? Monomoy does a lot of things well. You know, we get our kids prepared for college. There's a variety of clubs, programs, a phenomenal arts program, a solid athletics program. We have some really super teachers at all 4 of our schools. What I believe Monomoy needs to do a better job with is messaging. I really think we have to get the message right. There's a lot of people in the community that have these feelings about Monomoy, and it breaks my heart because I have a totally different experience. And I think we really need to work on the messaging. I think we have to have more community engagement. I think we do a great job within our school community, but we've got to be out more. We've got to be talking to people who don't have kids in the school system. I also very strongly believe, and this is something important to hear, not every kid is college bound, and we have to remember that. We do a great job getting our kids ready for college, but we also have a lot of kids that aren't going to college. We cannot not think about them. I'd like to see more life skills classes. We have personal finance, we have civics education. I'd like to see more kids in those classes because I agree with Linda. We have to have those kids ready to go into the workforce. And I want to see a stronger approach to learning and processing styles. We talk about MCAS all the time, but are we teaching the material in the way that the kids are going to learn it? That's another thing I think we really have to pay close attention to. And from a financial perspective, I'm very curious about creative funding sources. We have a state-of-the-art school at the high school. We have a state-of-the-art stadium. We have a wonderful concession stand and bathrooms now. I think we are missing the boat. There's some more money I think we can get in through our facilities. I know we're doing it already. I think there's more opportunities out there. Also, I have experience in grants, and I strongly believe that there's probably some more grants out there. We've got a busy staff administration, but I do believe there might be some more grant opportunities. I also read in the Chronicle recently that, you know, I was reading that some programs are ending with a grant. I guess my question is, you know, we have to prepare for that. We have to know when things are ending. You know, what's our game plan? Or is there another grant available? You know, where's the funding coming from? So I think there's a lot of things I can bring from a funding perspective, in addition to being just an excellent customer here. I'm just really, really happy customer. So I intend to be that voice.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was a school principal for 24 years, and the mission statement of every school that I led read, we are here to develop our students' knowledge, skills, and talents to the fullest, and every good school and good school system does that, so they can use those to make the world a better place for all. And I'm the kind of person who strongly believes that at the end of our lives, when it comes time to weigh what we've given and taken from life, that the pan that weighs what we've given is a little bit heavier than the pan that what we took. And that's the driving force behind why I'm interested in this position, because I'm a service-oriented person, and I believe in contributing my knowledge, skills, and talents to the community in ways that can benefit others. I have 2 main talents. One is music. I play the accordion. I play the digital accordion. I've played for newcomers events, nursing homes. I'm in the New England Digital Accordion Orchestra, only one of its kind in the country. We donate our time and do concerts all over New England. I just got a lineup this evening of concerts coming up in the future. That's not relevant tonight exactly, except for my love of the arts and support of the arts and education. My other area of knowledge, skill, and talents, people who know me call me an education junkie. And I just, even since I've retired, I've just hung around the education community. I've maintained my professional memberships. I've been a firm advocate for education in the communities where I lived. I lived in Worcester until 2014, but I was a part-time resident of Harwich. We had a second home through my wife since 1971. My kids have grown up in Harwich. When we came house hunting, when we made the decision to move to the Cape for the final years of our lives, Harwich was the only community we really looked at because we've loved the town and community. The Worcester School Committee, the City Council, the Mayor, the Worcester Legislative Delegation, all know me because of my advocacy for education matters, because of articles I've written, letters to the editor, personal meetings with them, speaking at school committee and city council meetings, advocating for things like better school financing, the impact of charter schools on public school financing, civics education. I was recruited to become a member of the board of directors of the Worcester Education Collaborative. I've maintained that membership. I'm on my second 3-year term. It's a group of movers and shakers in Worcester from the commercial community, higher education community, social service agencies, working to make Worcester education the best it can be. I have trying to follow suit with that now in Monomoy, and after we got settled in and after we got my daughter and her family settled in from Texas, living with us for 7 months in Harwich and now living in Brewster, but the 2 children have maintained membership in the Monomoy district by choice, under school choice, and I began to turn my attention to matters of the Monomoy School Department. So I answered the community call to join the 10-year NEASC self-study group as a community member. I worked on a faculty committee. I attended faculty meetings. In that process, I toured the building and met students at the high school at the invitation of Mr. Burkhead. That led to spending extensive time with Mr. Burkhead, just talking about leadership of schools where a home is a home away from, a school is a home away from home. I'm very attuned to the importance of caring as well as competence when it comes to the overall goals of what our school system should be and should be producing. He and I have talked a lot about that. I arranged meetings between Mr. Burkhead and key leadership of the Chatham-Harwich Newcomers organization, feeling a need for the community to know more about what was going on in the school system, the phenomenal things that I was seeing at the high school. That led to meetings with the leadership. That led to special programs that Mr. Burkhead has put on for the newcomers group, including tours of the building, an exposition of himself and his goals to the community, the senior community that's represented by the 750 or so members of that group. I started attending meetings in the 2017-18 school year of the school committee right when budget time started. That's the critical point of the year. My experience tells me that nothing affects the educational experience of the students in a school system more than the budget it's given to work with. It's just absolutely critical because it determines the resources and capabilities that the good people and the hardworking people in the district are capable of doing. At that time, I actually asked some questions of the business manager, Ms. Arsenio. She invited me in. She spent well over an hour with me, going through the budget with me. I wanted to be sure that I understood it. I have a lot of experience with reading school budgets. And she assured me that I was correct in my understanding that I was looking at one of the first, if not the first, adequate school budgets that I had seen in decades. And that's a feather in the cap of the community here. I've attended concerts and programs at the high school. I've attended programs for parents at the middle school that Mr. Wilson has put on. I have had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Wilson. I'm amazed at I'm very pleased with his openness to greet the public and welcome the public. At school committee, I heard a report from the Director of Student Services, Ms. McGuire. That area falls right into my background. I asked to meet with her and have questions answered. She was very generous with her time with me. I joined the Social and Emotional Learning Committee of the district. I've now just joined the Behavioral Health Committee of the district. I attended the first session of a course for parents that she was presenting, and then I stepped aside when my children came into the course, and I didn't think it would be good for their dad to be a part of a parenting course that they were taking. Into this school year, I've continued to attend school committee meetings. If I can't attend them, to watch the replays on the television. I was invited to serve as a community member on the District Strategic Planning Committee. I attended every session of that committee. It was over 20 hours of time spent in that process, culling all the input from the community forum of over 100 community people, and coming forth with a plan to bring us forward for the next 3 years and into the future. I was encouraged by my family, neighbors, friends, and people in the school community who know me to apply for this open position. I'm not sure if I will run for the position in May. I'm looking at this as I would look in school when I was in a situation that I'd have a teacher taking a leave, and I was right in the middle of MCAS season, and I've got 5 months facing me starting fairly immediately, and I would want someone who is as up and running as possible. So in a situation like that, my attention would turn to the person who's most up and running, the person who spent the most time in our system, that we feel comfortable with, that we know the background, that knows our background. And I think that, I don't think there's anyone in the community, perhaps that's any layperson right now, that's as up and running with the goings-on of the school department than I am, from the litany of activity that I've been involved in the last 2 years. Practically been there without being on the payroll. My background, I think, lends itself wonderfully to the school committee. In my opinion, I have 34 years as an educator. I've had direct experience in every phase of school operations and every type of issue. Before becoming an administrator, I was the president of the teachers union in my district. I was the chief negotiator in the district. I've negotiated contracts from both sides of the table, the teacher side and the administration side and the school committee side. In the school district that I worked in, my last superintendent required principals to serve on negotiating teams. I've negotiated with several of the various groups within the school system. Student support, I received the Massachusetts School Counselor of the Year Award in 1979-80. That's comparable to Mr. Burkhead's Principal of the Year Award in the counseling realm. I have a strong background in regular and special education as a principal. I know classroom instruction, curriculum, maintenance, school playground construction, design and planning for construction of new schools, major renovations, reassigning students. I've had to engineer a process of moving out of a school so it could be renovated, splitting my students up into various other schools, bringing everybody back, and coordinating 3 different schools that were closing along with my school into one functioning school, all in a 2-year period. I was also asked to serve on the committee that redistricted our town because of overload in certain schools and the need to deal with that overload and balance out student attendance loads. I have, unfortunately, a lot of background in dealing with tragedy that can occur at the school level. I've had to deal with 5 student deaths in my time as a principal: the unexpected death of a son of a faculty member, the death of a faculty member, the death of a spouse of faculty members, and I was the principal of Paxton Center School the year that the police chief of Paxton was murdered, which made national news. He was a graduate of our school. His 3 children were students at our school. He was a beloved person, and that was the most difficult experience I've ever had to deal with. Fortunately, I got through it with a lot of help from services at Boston Medical Center, which specialize in that, and learned a lot from that that I think could be lent in the event that we ever have such a tragedy. Thank goodness we haven't. Thankfully, I've had no active shooter experience, but I am aware of the latest protocols and how protocols are changing in that regard. Hopefully, that's something we'd never have to use. In budget, I've had to develop school building budgets. I've had to allocate staff within a staffing budget. I've had to reduce programs, eliminate programs, tell people following morning that their job no longer existed. When I was in Paxton, we were a one school committee system. So my budget was the school budget, and I put the budget together along with the superintendent, and then carry that budget through the process, right through the town meeting process, right through Proposition 2.5 override process. We were successful, by the way, in getting 3 out of 4 Proposition 2.5 overrides during my time. As far as what improvements need to be made in the system, I think the strategic plan that was just accepted by the school committee speaks for itself. I spent 20 hours working on that. I really support that. I worked for 20 hours with all the central office administrators, all of the principals, key parents, and key community members on that plan. Much of my input is reflected in that plan. When you read anything in that plan that talks about the importance of the home environment, supporting homes, families, supporting parent education, supporting parent advisory committees, that's reflective of some of my strong input. I have very strong input about the importance of early learning. And I think these are 2 areas that are greatly underestimated by all school districts, and that you'll see reflected in the plan. And I also think that we need to really continue to lobby. I've testified before the Joint Education Committee of the legislature on the financial reform bill and recommendations, discouraging to hear the latest news, but I think the town leaders and the school leaders have to continue to really lobby because we've got a very good thing going here in Monomoy that I'm really enthused about, and I'm really pleased and thrilled that my grandchildren, 2 of them, are attending Monomoy by school choice when they live in the Nauset district, and I think they made a great choice, and I'm really bullish on the Monomoy district. Would like to help if my background and experience can be helpful to them in getting through this difficult phase of the rest of the school year.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Terry?
Just a question for all four of you, just 1-minute answer. What would you identify as your most successful experience in public service?
Thanks.
Thank you.
I would say being part of the regionalization effort between Chatham and Harwich, and seeing that through, seeing a successful school district created, I think that speaks for itself.
I'll just go with the entire 30-year program. I was first appointed by the Board of Selectmen in 1989 on the Recreation and Beach Commission, and I've just been involved in the town ever since. I put 2 children through the schools in Harwich before there was the merger. And I was the last vote on the Finance Committee for, which made it unanimous for the support of the first budget of Monomoy, and right away the members said that I should be the one to speak at it at town meeting because that would carry the most weight at that time, that we voted unanimously to support the budget and to support the override that went with it, and that's what got the school off to a good start, and I'm pretty proud of what the Finance Committee did back then.
Alphabetical order?
On that track.
I'm going to go back to my advocacy work. Whether it was a PTA president or on the Commission on the Status of Women, some of the most rewarding work I've done has been with single moms and knowing how to advocate for their families, for their kids. I mean, I've spent probably the last 20 years in this type of work, and a lot of parents don't know how to advocate. I mean, this is not an easy thing. I mean, so a lot of us in this room would probably know to pick up the phone and who to call, but there are a lot of parents out there that really do not know how to advocate, and their kids are falling through the cracks. And this is something I strongly feel I can bring to the school committee. I've done this work for 20 years through public service, and it has been so rewarding to be able to teach, whether it is a single mom or even a single dad, how to advocate for your kids. And that truly is some of the most rewarding work, to watch a kid that has struggled to go to some form of a success because of some doors that we've opened. So.
Getting my
Got one more. You. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I taught a 20-hour course for parents on developing and producing self-esteem, developing and preserving self-esteem in their children, aimed on research showing at how the home and family environment can impact the positive performance of students at school and their social relations. I turned the most difficult case I ever had as a counselor that I thought needed professional assistance far superior to mine around and brought an extremely withdrawn child into a leader in the community through using the principles in that course and by having the parents of that youngster take the course. I've also lectured on that throughout New England at faculties and at parent groups, church groups. And I've always said that despite all of my 34 years in school systems, the thing that I had the most impact perhaps in the end of life was the work that I did with parents on what they could do to bring their children forward to really healthy development as competent and caring adults.
Thank you.
I was about to say, I'm beginning my 9th year in this role as school committee, and I think I'd better give up my seat to one of you folks. Great, and thank you, and great job all 4 of you.
Thank you, Terry. Any other follow-up questions from the school committee? No? From the board? Larry?
I'll start. Thank you. What a great group of 4 with high credentials. And I agree, the school's doing a great job, everything I hear. Let me ask you a question, though. I attended, Scott Carper, you're here, the one-day session you had a couple months ago, which was a great look at a lot of participation on strategic planning going forward. And a lot of great ideas came out of that. We put up this sticker board at the end, which is kind of a funny team technique. Everyone thought that the end-all to be-all was money, more money. Even though we listed maybe 100 different ideas for educational improvement, I'd like to ask each of you, can you give me one item that would improve the school system that does not involve money?
It does not involve money?
Right.
Well, this is where you're, you know, I've done a lot of work over the years with partnerships, a lot of mentoring. You know, I've brought people in, and it depends on the program, because you can create a lot of after-school programs and looking at the budget, kind of looking to where the money is going in programs. But there's a lot of pro bono work that I have brought in through leading certain programs, whether it is grant. I mean, grant money is money, but it's money that's not in the budget. It's going to be something new coming in. So I have been able to go out and work partnerships in the community and mentoring. So pro bono work without the exchange of money. But I've done a lot of after-school programs in my last 20 years. If that might have landed in a budget had you not had a different way of it coming in.
Go down the line, perhaps. Question made me actually think of the second proudest thing I've ever been involved in my career, and this was post-retirement. I didn't have time. One of the big areas that I feel is so critical and overlooked is the early years, preschool years. I firmly believe, based on all of my experience, that the most critical years in life occur between birth and 5 when it comes to ultimate school achievement and outcomes, long-term outcomes for children. Certainly between birth and grade 3. One of the biggest factors there is vocabulary development. And there is a great differentiation at the age 2 and 3 of children based on of their vocabulary development. That plays a critical role. Some people have actually said it could determine your life. I was involved in played a role in getting started in Worcester on an initiative that continues today, trying to get parents, the message out to parents, the most important 20 minutes of the day is spent reading to or with your child. And we took that motto, we took it out into the community, we got the support, financial support of the private sector to get posters, get the message out, ran on the buses in town, read to your child, most important 20 minutes of the day, read to your child. Every school has posters posted with that message as you entered the school. and working on, we have a Colt committee that continues to exist, and I stay in touch with. Just trying to get more and more people to understand. If we could get people, we worked with the pediatric community because birth is critical, and we've got pediatricians in the Worcester community now giving out books at the pediatric visit, talking about the importance of reading to children. I think there's probably no single factor, and it doesn't cost a penny, than to have a movement like that within a community that would pay tremendous benefits to the outcomes of children in school. I'd like to work with Lucy Gilmore, the Monomoy Family Resource Coordinator. She would be in the role similar to the role that the people in Worcester that I worked with worked to explore what's going on in that area and what could be done more. We tend to focus grade K to 12, but birth to 5 is so critical, and I just think that's important for the community to know.
Thank you.
I think when you talk about the money, if you look at the top 20 schools that have the same size students as we have in Monomoy, we come in number 18th. That means there are 2 schools that spend more money than we do in terms of just spending. So the money is really there. It's more important to us to figure out how to better allocate it in some cases and how to work with it. One of the best teachers in the country was recognized, and she teaches in Harlem, and she says she teaches with a piece of chalk and a chalkboard. Strengthening that end of our teaching community is probably the most important thing we can do without money. Money doesn't solve every problem, and thinking that it does is probably the biggest harm that we do ourselves, to think that if we can throw more money at it, we'll be able to fix that. Right now, the money's there. It's more important for us to figure out how to get it out of the system than to just continue to throw more money in. And this year is, between now and May, the superintendent has already said it's a perfect storm of money challenges coming into them system. Better fitting that into a puzzle is going to be really the key to the next 4 months.
Thank you.
For something that would not cost money, I think that one of the most important things we can do is mentoring. I think that, and mentoring does not necessarily have to be one-on-one, it can be in groups. One of my another very rewarding experiences was spending the 10 years that I did at a Boys and Girls Club and watching the children through various programs, group settings, activities, to watch them gain confidence and watch them grow. And it particularly, one of the things that we started was a hip-hop group. And you would think that that wouldn't give anybody any confidence. But when you watch, particularly girls at that age who are extremely body conscious, and when they start dancing, and then they can get themselves to performing, that's the type of mentoring. It doesn't cost any money, but it's the mentoring concept. So I'm with you, Tina. Mentoring.
Linda.
I have no questions at this time.
I'll stick with one.
I have no questions. Thank you all very much.
Ed? Don?
Count on me.
Middle this time.
I'm going to preface this by saying I've had 2 generations of kids going through both Harwich, now Monomoy. I've seen one of them become valedictorian, and I've had another one as fostering that dropped out of school, never got her high school diploma. In my experience is there's no paucity of supporting mechanisms around the school system. So it's kind of an adjunct to what Larry was asking. There's only been passing mention of the group that, the stakeholder group that pays for the whole thing, because the majority of the people don't have anybody in the school. So with that, I'm going to ask you, the first question is, does anybody have an idea of the aggregate budget increase from the first year of the Monomoy School District to the current year? Or as an alternative, what the average increase of the budget's been over the last 5 years?
Go for it, David.
We'll start in the middle. I know it's been going up over the 3.5%. I know I sat over there when the superintendent early on said that after the first couple budgets, we would be able to live with 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, and he made that actual gesture, and it hasn't happened. It's been higher than that. We are well over our foundation budget, and that's the real key here. And talking to Larry's question, the community has supported that. The community has gone out and said that we want this ability to provide this education. So the money's there, and it's time, and I'll say it even on the town side, it's time to start slowing this train down. We have 12,000 people in town. For a while, everything we did in Harwich was to adjust to those 12,000 people, because it went from 3,000 people to 12,000 people. We were increasing budgets, we were increasing staff, we were increasing everything. Well, we've been over 20 years now at 12,000 people. And the only thing that's continued to increase is the size of our budgets. So I worry about those 12,000 people. They're gonna run out of being able to afford to do this at some point. How do we slow that train down? I think you can go back over the years and I'll just say I'm a candidate that will offer suggestions on how that can be done without saying we gotta get rid of teachers and programs and this and that. There are other ways to manipulate budgets to make them not impact the taxpayer as much.
I just want to say, Don, this is, the question you ask, first of all, I don't have the exact number that you're looking for, but I do agree that I know it's gone up. This is a very common story. Coming from Alexandria, Virginia, this was something that those of us on the PTA council, you know, the percentage of people going just in schools in Alexandria, Virginia versus the people that didn't have kids in schools, we have the same issue. And the way I think I would answer that is, you know, I think we have to get out there and talk more about the success, but we also do need to look at creative funding sources. I mean, I understand, you know, we do have to work within this budget. I'm a taxpayer, we're all taxpayers, and certainly I don't want my taxes going up either, so I kind of have to look at where the investment is. I mean, we need to get a good return on our investment. And so what I would be doing is looking at some creative funding sources. I would want to explore. I would want to see, you know, where could we, like, I'm going back to the facilities again. I know we're renting out our facilities over at the high school, but I'm kind of wondering what other opportunities are there. You know, where else could we be pulling some money in so it's not just expanding the budget always? And that's kind of what I would want us to explore. You know, what can we look at that's creative, that's beyond what we've been thinking about all of these years? Because I'm not so sure that you can shrink it, but how can we not go beyond, you know, what we've got already? So that's what I would be looking at as creative funding sources.
I shared the concern, and that's why I started attending school committee meetings when I did, when the budget became under discussion. Like many in the community, I'm a retiree on a fairly fixed income that has benefited since my retirement by the lack of runaway inflation, that now beginning to wonder how that's going to impact me more and more. So certainly take seriously my taxation issue and how my tax dollars are put to use. I will say, though, that I come from a community that's funded right at foundation level. I can tell you absolutely, foundation level is totally inadequate despite the state's definition of adequacy. So I can tell you horror stories about elementary classrooms at the most critical grades, kindergarten to second grade, of 28, 29 students, half of whom don't speak English, half of whom aren't going to be in class at the end of the year who began the year, and teachers trying to achieve educational goals under those circumstances. Without situations where, if not for the PTOs, you wouldn't have paper in the schools, you wouldn't have basic instructional materials, situations where class time is utilized, youngsters copying things off the board because they don't have textbooks for them in advanced science classes so they could take the material home to learn it. you know, that experience. I worked in a community, I lived in that community, and that's where I spent my time focused after retirement. I worked for 34 years in the Wachusett district, which was the first and still the largest of the regional school districts, 5-town district, largest in area. Very comparable in the educational goals of this community, very much wanting to do what the Monomoy community does. They have the same class size goals and targets as the Monomoy goals. I just read an article yesterday, I still subscribe to the local newspaper. They would need $2.9 million added to their budget to achieve our goals. That's their school committee goals. They haven't achieved them in years. They weren't achieving them back in my day. They would need to add 15 counselors to the district to get up to the par of what would be the recommended ratio. Monomoy is meeting that ratio. I am bullish on Monomoy coming here, and bullish about my grandkids coming to Monomoy as opposed to the other school systems they could attend on the Cape because of the school budget giving the educators the tools, the resources, the staffing, the conditions they need. I've spoken at school committee meetings and said, the school committee has granted, the town has granted a budget in which we can demand excellence from the schools. There's no excuse to demand anything less than excellence from the budget that we're providing. Like I said, there have to be certainly other ways, and there's a big bang for the buck when you look at early childhood, preschool, what can be done in homes and families and working with families. A lot of that was reflected at the meeting. I didn't attend the meeting of the 100 people. I had a prior commitment that day, but certainly reviewed every input at the Strategic Planning Committee. And the committee really took that input from the community and worked it, and really worked it during its meetings and worked it into the plan. And other things that were mentioned here, big call for civics education, big call for life skills education. You know, and so the plan, when you see it and study it, shows that it is built into where the accountability is going to be coming up here. So I'm bullish on that as well.
Thank you.
To the question, I think that the increase has been significant. I remember with Dana, when we were listening on the Board of Selectmen and in the Finance Committee, we would be able to start living within the 3%, 3.5% budget. There has been probably 4 to 4.5% increase every year. It increases, it goes up. One of the things that it impacts is the ability of the town to provide their own services that are separate from, but in addition to, the schools, police, fire, and our community service, our other community services. I think the town has been very generous in supporting the things that the town, including the schools, want to do. But I also think that we have to start thinking about how to start living within our means and how we need to start doing as much as we can with the money that we are providing.
Thank you, Linda. You have a follow-up, because Donna.
I do have a follow-up. If this were the price is right, you would have come closest, but no one got the answer right. We're nowhere near in danger of being in a foundation budget. I mention this only because you'd have to be a fool to say that there's no difference between going to Choate and going to New Bedford public schools. But if you approach this, and I'm saying this to you because one of you is going to become a school committee member, if you don't know those numbers and you can't visualize this being like your own household, that I would do anything for my kids, and I truly value education, and I've spent far more than 20 minutes reading to them. That being said, at a certain point in time, you're not doing your kids any good if you dump all the money in your household towards them and you don't have anything left for your mortgage, your heat, your electricity. All these things operate in tandem with each other in the community as we are sewering, as we are doing other things. And how we're able to do those things requires, it's not just a request, it requires you to look at what you're spending and how you're deploying it and what effect it has.
Donna?
I don't want to get into a big debate here about the budget, but just starting off, forget what we do in the schools. Health insurance costs, energy costs escalate so high that what's left is not a whole lot. So it sounds like the schools have a lot of money, but a lot of that is gone through those issues. But I don't want to get into a big debate.
Thank you, Donna. Any other?
Can I follow up with a response then?
Sure.
I think that's why, Mr. Hall, I made the comment that we really have to work hard to continue to lobby the legislature on a revision of the foundation budget. Because we know the foundation budget is at least $2.1 billion statewide out of whack, primarily because it hasn't kept up with special education and health insurance costs. So every dollar that the state, that affects the funding that comes back to us. What doesn't come back to us comes out of our pockets. And so in the long term, not the short term, is that we have to keep the pressure on for changes in that and make sure that our representatives in the legislature understand the impact and how that impacts every community and every individual taxpayer. That being said, I see the role of the school committee is to bring forward the needs of the school department to the public, to the town meeting, and that their primary role is to guarantee that we're doing the best job for our kids in the district with what we present. It's not the final say of the school committee to do that. That's the say of people at town meeting. It's the responsibility of the school department to educate, present its case, and explain why the schools where some of the most important work in the community is going on, just as in the fire department and in the police department, and the most important work is going on in the homes and families of the community. But I think the school department's role is to make sure that they are coming forth clearly and with transparency of what the community needs to have a first-class education program for its district. Whether the means are there or not, and undoubtedly the time is coming where we're going to have to start really dealing with that as early as this year. But I think the school committee has to stay focused on that particular role as what it's assigned by the community to do for the community.
Thank you. Linda?
Just as a comment, as we talk about budgets and money and what we can do and not do, I think something that I would look to the school department and I would try to push forward the unfunded mandate issue. We have educators in our family. I have one of my nieces is a brand new second grade teacher, and the amount of paperwork that she has to do above and beyond doing grading papers, reading papers, and the amount of time that she has to spend, that I think that we need to look at and go back to our legislators, that some of these ideas of all the paperwork, all the reporting, really needs to be streamlined. And they talk about in the government up on Beacon Hill to try to streamline getting permitting, getting business licenses to try to get that streamlined. I think that some of this reporting in the schools also needs to be looked at and needs to be streamlined.
Thank you, Linda. Any other questions from any board members? Sharon?
I would just ask, and I don't expect you necessarily to know this, but I wonder if any of you might know the implication of school choice when our children leave Monomoy if they don't have an adequate education here, in terms of the funding that goes out to other public schools or charter schools. So if anyone would like to speak to that, that would be great.
Go ahead. Not sure if I fully understand the question.
I'm talking about the cost factor.
I've spoken at public hearings on the charter school issue. I've spoken to my legislators. I've tried to urge school committee people and city councilors on this issue. Problem with charter schools, do not close the achievement gap, and basically they rob Peter to pay Paul. And what they do is puts additional pressure on the public school, because money is flowing out of the budget to another school district. Now, they say that it's benefiting the school because you're getting so much money per pupil for each child that comes into you by school choice, but that money does not balance off the cost of operating your school system. If I have one student come in under school choice into my 5th grade and I get $5,000 for that child, it doesn't mean, or if one of my students moves out from 5th grade, it doesn't mean now I can eliminate one 5th grade teacher. I'd probably have to, have 15 students in the same grade level move out for me to, affect the kind of cost savings that would need to be affected. So I've spoken long and hard about charter schools are an interesting concept, but the way they are funded is hurting the public schools, and it is another area that we need to be advocating for. And to back up Linda's comment, I took early retirement at the first opportunity I could because I was tired of the paperwork and the regulation had overwhelmed me. And when I got to the point where I could have been spending my entire day in my office at my computer doing my required paperwork assignments, students and faculty would never see me in the, and I still wouldn't be done, I'd be taking it home. As it was, I took boxes home, worked 70-hour weeks, and it was mainly if you were going to be out there during the day, and that's what you needed to do all the paperwork. The same thing is truly overwhelming the teachers. My daughter is a high school teacher in one of the state's internet schools, and my wife was a high school teacher, and I speak to teachers. The job is getting very discouraging. Just because they're trying to do the best for kids, but so much of their time is spent not teaching kids.
Thank you.
My only comment was that.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, oh, sure.
I wanted to just talk just for a second about school choice. Moving from Virginia, this was constantly on the ballot, school choice. It was not ever passed in Virginia because of exactly what you're saying. I mean, we had this dance in Virginia between school choice. So when we moved to Massachusetts, I was fascinated, that we had school choice. So when people were leaving Monomoy, I wanted to know why. And I actually, just myself as a parent, would reach out and try to find out because I needed to know, why are you leaving? Some of them had valid excuses, like the swim team. Monomoy doesn't have a swim team. There were some specific reasons. But again, this goes back to messaging. This goes back to, what can we do to catch them off? I think there might be an exit interview perhaps done. I'm thinking when families leave. I'm not sure. That's not happening. It should be. Because I think we need to know why people are leaving. And this goes back to that messaging piece. And I think we have to cut some of these things off before they happen. And this, again, goes to advocacy and having a parent voice around the table. I probably will be hearing things that the rest of you are not going to hear. And so if I'm getting wind of people leaving, I will certainly get some movement going because we really do need to know why people are leaving. Some of them are valid, but some of them, I think there are things that are fixable and you can grab them before they leave.
So, I just, because of Don mentioning that, the numbers are important. It's like over 15,000 for the kids leaving that take it to a charter schools. So a few of those takes a teacher salary.
It does.
But anyway, thank you all for your answers.
Can I get anybody have a motion or?
Do we nominate?
We nominate now.
So, right, any kind of motion to nominate.
Well, you're going to find out about it. It's a public meeting.
We're here.
Well, if you want to sit,
Whatever you, I mean,
if you want to sit in the audience, that's probably less imposing on us as we come to discuss you. I mean, quite,
Move out then? Okay.
quite
Hold your
honestly,
hands over your
I've gone through this process
Thank
of
you.
appointing somebody to take a place in small communities, and it's always amongst people you know all of them well, and quite honestly, the process just sort of sucks.
I would agree with that.
Chris has an idea of how we do it.
Just, Madam Chair, as I indicated at the beginning, maybe just, I think you have 4 great candidates, and just one nomination for each, just to put them in for consideration, and then to make motions for appointment to fill the vacancy, and then, entertain the motions to do that.
Okay, so we'll just.
I'd make a nomination. Thank you. First off, real quickly, thank you to all 4. There have been times with the select boards as well as school committees that sat and saw no one, just an empty seat, or one person. So it's a pleasure to have 2, 3, 4 people come forward and say, for free, with no salary, I'm willing to serve. And personally, coming from my life experience, not only was it an interview process, but it was a little educational seminar for all of us as to how best to get a little bit better. So, and that tough decisions, I'd like to nominate Charles Grutzka for 2 major reasons. The first is, I alluded to the board, but also the school committee. For years, I think we've tried to expand the civic participation of folks in our community, so that all of us don't have to do a second or a third or a 4th term as veterans. So we've tried to expand it and cause people to come out and cause to have a fresh face. I think Charlie gives us that. If I can call him Charlie, I've been going Charles. So not only a fresh face, but he plays the accordion. Most important, my second reason. I think Charlie's professional background really does speak for itself. I was duly impressed. He has walked the walk. I've seen him the past year at our meetings, coming out publicly. He's joined that strategic steering committee. All things that point to the fact that he's got personal motivation to join us. Coming from a classroom teacher experience to a principal for 30 years, Charlie has done all that's required and then some for someone who's going to sit on the board to look at the best way to cause kids to be the best they can be, whether it's 5-year-olds or seniors going off to schooling or to some trade. So I saw the classroom work to look over a building and see how improvements in curriculum could be made, and evaluation or interviewing staff. All of those things are key, critical, and for those reasons, I see a guy like him coming in without missing a beat and causing the next 5 months to be very productive. So that's my offering.
Okay, thank you, Terry.
Do you need a second? I'll
Yep.
second.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded.
We were just going to put the names forward
Forward,
initially,
each
so
one,
just one
right,
for each candidate.
But we'll go through, okay.
Yeah.
Right, so, so do you, Sharon?
Oh, I'd like to, are we nominating other people?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to nominate Tina Games, and that I feel that Tina is very knowledgeable about what's going on in the schools with her children and being an advocate. And I think, she mentioned the term bridge. I like that term. I think that she is both fiscally responsible and she's looking out for the kids. I don't think she's in just one camp there. I think it's a very good balance, and I think she's the head of the culture committee. I think she knows a lot of what's going on in the town and the schools, so I nominate her.
Thank you. Larry?
Well, we'll all go different directions, I guess. I'll nominate Linda Sabula, probably for some of the reasons that Terry mentioned, but I'll reverse it a little bit in that, I think the school committee is a policy-setting committee. They're not the teachers per se. And so I'm anxious to get someone maybe that is very interested in education, has some background on their involvement, but we'll look at not from necessarily from the teaching aspect, as we let the teachers do that. So I like the idea of paying attention to not only what all the policies are going forward. I think we want the school committee to always be advocates. That's their job, as one of the candidates mentioned, is advocate for them, as they expect the fire to have their advocates. On the other hand, I would like that person to look at and pay attention to, at least some degree, what the responsibilities of the town are, and their safety, their affordable housing, their, education is a strong pillar, but have other things going on too. So I think there's some benefit, even though the 2 candidates have been nominated, obviously very strong, I think there's some benefit to have someone that's very interested in education and has a somewhat different perspective to bring that to the committee.
Thank you, Larry. Michael?
So the person I'm going to pick has already been mentioned, so there's no need for me to go further, but thank all 4 candidates. Great job, and all 4 of you, I think, would be great on the school committee.
Okay, great. Ed, do you have a different, Bob?
I just have a comment that whoever we vote for, we need to recognize, kind of what Larry was saying, is that a baseball team that was full of 25 pitchers and no one else wouldn't be a great team. And it's sometimes you need different skill sets to be able to make the strongest team possible.
Thank you.
You didn't, I don't know.
No, so I'm gonna, the person I would nominate has already been nominated as well. So, at this point.
At this point, there's 3 people that have been put in, names have been put into nomination.
Right.
I guess there's 2 ways to do this, unless there's, we can do each name and then have a vote, or I could do roll call, or, you know, if you want me to record roll call and see what the first ballot says for the number of people.
I suppose. Is that your normal, your experience? We might as well.
So I'll do roll call, and just because where you're sitting, I'm just gonna, so if out of the 3 that have been nominated, Linda, Tina, and Charles, so Terry, who would you vote for?
Charles.
Donna?
Charles.
Sharon?
Tina.
Linda?
Linda?
Linda.
Tina.
Vote for Tina.
Tina?
Linda?
So 2 for Charles, 3 for Tina, and 3 for Linda. My suggestion would be that since Tina received 3 and that Linda received 3, that those 2, Linda and Tina, be the ones, and we'll do the same thing and just put those 2 names, if that is okay with the group. So out of the 2 remaining finalists, Linda and Tina. Terry?
Tina.
Donna?
Tina.
Tina.
Linda?
Linda.
Tina.
Tina.
Linda.
I'm trying to write, as you guys are saying, so.
5-3.
You said the
Julie
roll call.
was Tina,
Yeah.
Ed was Tina, and Dawn was Linda. So 5-3, Tina has the majority of the votes.
Okay. So,
Thank you all. Good night.
all.
Thank you.
I did want to say to all of you, to reiterate every board member up here, their opinion, and it's really a blessing to have 4 people who are truly qualified, and we appreciate your willingness to participate and be involved in the community. You've already all contributed greatly, so we really appreciate it. Thank you. And Dana, you do an awesome
Thank
job
you.
where you are. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay.
Okay, moving on.
Ed is,
He's got to be the person who moves on.
Oh, he's got to read the consent.
yeah.
How about if, we have a form, how about I read the
Can I
consent
just read,
agenda?
yeah, you can read, will you read the consent?
Madam
agenda?
Chair,
Thank you.
I would,
Yeah, hold on. We're going to move on with the meeting, so if you would just take the conversations outside. Where's the gavel? I don't have it tonight when I need it. Where is it? They're going.
okay. Madam Chair, I move the following consent agenda.
Oh, you wanted to
I had
remove.
asked him to pull
Sorry.
aside C and D.
Okay. That being said, I move the following consent agenda items. Minutes, November 5th, 2018, regular session. Don, you C and D, right?
Yeah, he said C and D, right.
B, vote to accept resignation of James Atkinson as full member of the Planning Board. E, vote to approve and sign the 19 seasonal population increase estimate form.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Don?
Yeah, I might just mention that under the minutes that are posted in that consent agenda, they identify Mr. Harlow as the chair of the planning board, and that is inaccurate. James Joyce is.
Right. Thank you. We'll make that notation, Chris.
Is that okay with you, Chris?
Considering he's not on that board, it's appropriate.
Just checking.
Okay, so moved and seconded with
With
that,
that change.
with that change. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and now we'll do,
That was 4-0 because Ed
Ed
has
is, oh, right. Was C and D separate you wanted to do?
You want to do them without Ed, or?
Yeah. I don't think it matters.
Okay,
Here he comes.
I knew he'd be here.
So you were
We took,
with Patricia Stackhouse. So Ed, we've done A, B, and E, so we're talking C and D.
Sure.
As to C, I have a question. I didn't get to ask Anita this today. Did Pat Stackhouse actually get sworn in?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
Because that materially changes what we're doing. We're either rescinding or accepting a resignation. If she got sworn in, she has to resign.
So do you want to hold? I don't have
It's
an
up to you
answer.
folks. We
Do
don't
you
have a
know?
replacement
I
for
think we
it.
should hold it, because based on the information in the package, if you read the email chain, she was,
She was never contacted.
It was more.
she said she wasn't contacted.
contacted,
Right.
that's what
So
confused
it
me.
sounded like she wasn't.
I
That
think
was,
we take it back up next week.
yeah, we'll hold it. Okay.
And Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the 2019 annual general license renewals with all the restrictions that were currently on each of those licenses as appears in our packet.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
And just a point of clarification, I guess, is on the appointment of Patricia Stackhouse. What do you want me to?
Bring it back.
Bring it back because we need to know whether she actually got sworn in.
Okay, just whether she was
Because-
sworn in or
Right,
not.
it
Because the
doesn't
packet
sound
in-
like that in the packet. It's-
Packet information is confusing.
Yeah, it sounds like she was never contacted,
That's
so,
what it
So
sounded
we
like
want
to
to know
me.
if whether she was sworn in or not.
right,
Because they're different actions. One's
Yeah.
rescission and one's.
That was why, I just wanted to see what the follow-up item was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
so we can bring that back next week. Public hearings and presentations. Public hearing at the Finance Committee joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and Capital Outlay Committee on the submitted 7-year capital outlay plan.
This is formally a public hearing, so
Right.
someone should read the notice.
I noticed, yeah. Oh, great, perfect. And then call your meeting to order. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow, good.
That's right.
I understand.
Angela?
Okay, we'll call the Finance Committee to order, and I'll have our clerk read the notice of the public hearing.
Hi, my name's John Shorey. I'm on the Harwich Finance Committee. Notice of public hearing, capital outlay plan, fiscal year 2020 budget. Pursuant to Chapter 9, Section 7 of the Harwich Home Rule Charter, the Finance Committee will hold a public hearing at a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Capital Outlay Committee on Monday, January 7th, 2019, no earlier than 6:30 p.m. in the Don B. Griffin Room, Harwich Town Hall, 732 Main Street, Harwich, for the purpose of reviewing the fiscal year 2020 to 2026 Harwich 7-year capital outlay plan. Copies of the plan are available on the town website and at the town administrator's office during regular business hours. All members of the public having an interest in this topic are cordially invited to attend the public hearing and provide information and testimony relevant to the matter. Signed, Dana DeCosta, Chairman, Finance Committee, Cape Cod Chronicle, December 27th, 2018.
Thank you. I don't know how they would do it, but I'll just say that we'll open it up to the public first to give us any comments they would like to give us, and then we'll give the opportunity for the three boards to make comments if they would like to. So first off, anybody from the public wishing to make any comment about a capital plan?
I think Rich should probably, if he has a majority of members here, call his meeting
Yeah,
to order.
to order
too,
as well, right.
Since it's a three-board meeting.
Ditto what he said.
Yeah.
My members are here. You want to come up? You don't? Okay.
Okay, so again, it's
We're
open to the
announcing our
public.
meeting
Yeah,
also.
perfect, great. So, all meetings have been noted as being open to public comment. Does anybody in the audience want to make any public comment on the capital plan? No. Hearing nobody.
Madam Chair, I just want to say, I'm the planning board
Right, all right.
member of the Capital Outlay
Oh,
Committee.
wait, right, sorry, yeah.
I'm the representative from the
Right.
planning board.
Thank
That's
you.
why I'm sitting here.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate that.
Probably have a hat on each side.
Comments from the board, any
Yep.
specific? Okay, so we'll start with you, Don.
Do we have a summary sheet which excludes the things that are under $50,000?
Actually, Dana did pass that out.
I know, but
We're using his.
we're using his. We don't have one of our own.
We'll probably use his as same material.
I'm only saying that because we all agree that the charter says the capital plan is for items that are $50,000 or more. While we may plan to spend those other monies elsewhere,
So there's no confusion, which I'm confused, and I helped create. The new date is 12/18 on the master sheet, which is colorful. Okay? And that's the capital outlay production is the colored sheet.
Okay, I don't have
We don't
a
have that.
secondary.
Whatever
want the
Dana
small?
passed out.
Okay, what Dana gave you
We have,
Okay.
is
we
the
have the,
Cliff Notes.
these are the,
Okay.
these are
And
the,
that's in case
Thank
you're not I have a taking- color version for him. Right, if you're not taking the test, this is the Cliff Notes.
Thank you. I would like, can I have quick notes?
Yep.
I will take the test too.
I'll just say on the smaller version, the numbers are exact. All I did was take out a couple extra columns and maybe shorten some of the titles. And it was just so that we could provide it in the size that it fits into the warrant in an area where you can read it. And at the request of one of my members, we added the column for the article numbers later, and we put in the funding sources, and on the back page, you can see how they all total up. But the town administrator's numbers and my numbers add up exactly so that there won't be any confusion that way.
Great, thank you. Ed?
Just a comment, you know, for review purposes, I think the shortened version is fine. However, if you're going to put something in the warrant, I think it needs to have the full and exact titles of the different items that are being funded. You can run into future mischief if you've abbreviated something and somebody's not clear what the abbreviation stands for. You know, dropping out the column on notes is probably appropriate because it's really not part of it. But I know when we created the table of the revolving funds, a lot of the titles and what the purpose of the fund got condensed and don't reflect what was originally passed when those funds were originally set up, but now they're being held to this condensed version. And it's a real problem, and that's something in the current year, I think we need to revisit all of the approvals, initial approvals of those revolving funds and making sure that the original exact language is in it to be put on the table.
Yeah, that can be fixed in terms of what I do.
This is the
first time that we're
Yeah.
interacting on what we see.
Mhm.
From my standpoint, if I were to look at the capital plan, I sort of like the
the middle part of the long version, because it tells you what the department requested, what the town administrator requested, and what the capital outlay committee actually voted on.
That's
I
fine.
think it's critical. I
Yep.
think, it shows that there was action. So, I understand space is an issue, but somehow we can fit it, even if it's portrait or the other way.
Landscape.
Landscape.
Yeah. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Ed fundamentally, because the titles of these things are supposed to be transparent to the voters. But, again, I kind of feel like each year we're going through Where's Waldo here, because we got a preponderance of facts and figures that don't relate to the capital plan. Even in this smaller version, there's a whole bunch of things that you folks aren't going to vote on. They're under $50,000. The reason I'm harping on this is the public really has the right to see a plan that's a capital plan. Aside from all of the other grand plans that we've got for other things that are going on, whether they be tasers or compressors or whatever, but if it's under $50,000, we really should be driving the point home to the voters who are going to get this thing. Here is your capital plan without all these other things involved in it.
Madam Chair, we did last year do two versions in the section of the article specifically. We did only the 50,000. I will clean that up. I should have had a clean version, but I think Dana's effort here is pretty similar to what you're going to see. I may just block out some of the columns, but I think really the point of the public hearing, it's good to get the input, so I make sure I make those changes, but is to really see if there's any input from the public in terms of any of the elements of the plan itself, I would imagine.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, in the previous years, you listed 50,000 and below at the end.
At the end.
Yeah,
Because there's
at
appendix.
it was a
That solves the
separate,
problem.
right,
That's what
And
we'll
then
do again.
that's what we do.
right.
So it's not here, it's mixed in here, but when it's presented in its final version,
If we're going to be doing it that way at the end, we should be doing that way at the beginning.
but it doesn't, no, as a working document,
Okay.
as a working document, we need to see it. And what we didn't vote on, and it's in the plan.
Go ahead, Dan.
Just one quick follow-up on all of that. If you look at, on the town administrator's items, there is the green efficient vehicles, the fleet there, those any particular year are under 50,000, but as an aggregate, they go well over the 50,000. It's over 200,000 in total. And I know by definition, when the capital plan was created, that we tried to define it that way, that the original threshold was 100,000, and if something was under 100,000, but if it was leading to a bigger project in future years, that we would include it. So that's, again, the working document, as I've always said, is a real good tool that we use at Capital Outlay to just measure and put it all together. But then when you get to town meeting, what ends up in the warrant is up to you guys. And presenting it a couple different ways has actually helped as a good check and balance between the Finance Committee and the town administrator to make sure that our numbers both match. And when we both do it separately, find a $30 million error, we got to figure those things out, and it's worked to our benefit.
Right. Thank you. Ed?
Well, you know, I can understand the cumulative number for the green fuel efficient fleet schedule, being over $50,000 cumulatively over many years. But likewise, in the police department, we have cruisers that we buy every year, and cumulatively, as a matter of fact, I think in each year, we spend over 50,000, but they're nowhere in the capital plan. So, I mean, it's sort of hit or miss whether we put something in or not, and we need to either have rules that apply everywhere, or they don't apply anywhere.
Two on that one. Cruisers used to be
I know.
on the capital plan, and
Now
one
they're being
time,
expensed.
they were in an article
They're in
that
the
didn't get
operating
funded,
budget.
Yeah.
and we,
So his
a past Board of Selectmen put them in the budget and that's
Yeah,
where
you
they ride.
guys.
Showing them on here is probably not a bad idea, but they belong in the budget as an item we buy every year.
Well, apparently, we're gonna be buying green vehicles every year.
Unless we vote them out.
You know,
On that,
so I mean, where's the rule? I don't, you know.
well, the rule as to how the warrant appears is up to you. Budgeting is what he proposes.
Yeah.
On that, I would, as a specific item on this plan, I would just like to hear the thumbnail version of, I mean, we've been taking vehicles from the police department and passing them down to these departments that are now gonna get the green vehicles. So essentially, they've cost us only the money that it takes to maintain them and get them painted for municipal use. Now we're gonna be spending for brand-new cars. How do you see that changing the program, or how the way police cars are passed down, or do you say, you don't see an increase in fleet size? Do you see a reduction in fleet size, or at some point, or how does this impact what we do with
I think
police?
specifically to the point, Madam Chair, through you, on the green vehicles, there's two things. One, we do have on the agenda later on that we have been officially designated as a green community. That has unlocked, and now we have in the first year a designation of $154,000 of funding that is given to the town. There's 5 tenets to being a green community. One of those tenets, which the Board of Selectmen did vote, is that we have to use more fuel-efficient vehicles for our basically non-emergency fleet, which means the old hand-me-down cars, and every town I've ever been in has had the same policy, those hand-me-down cars are not fuel-efficient. The town does have 2 choices that it can make in terms of that. We can actually find vehicles that are more fuel-efficient than the current ones that are hand-me-down, so we have an option of doing more fuel-efficient vehicles. And then the second option is obviously a green vehicle or an electric vehicle has a much greater, mileage allotment and so on. So the green vehicles or the electric vehicles can automatically meet that mileage standard. So we have 2 options. The option that's being laid out here in the capital plan is to go with the green or electric type vehicles or hybrid vehicles. Part of the reason for that is that there is federal incentives that we're not an entity that's get taxed, so we don't have the tax implications, but the vehicles that we get from a lease do get to, those vendors do get to take that federal tax credit. So the green vehicles, because of that federal tax credit, tend to be almost as cost-effective as doing these more fuel-efficient vehicles. But it's simply a standard, and the typical cruiser, it's not designed to be fuel-efficient. It's designed to get to point A and point B in a timely fashion. So, those vehicles can't be hand-me-downs anymore. So based upon the board's vote, we need to either do a more fuel-efficient vehicle or a green or electric type vehicle in order to comply with the board's policy that was part of the Greens community.
Rich? Yeah, 2 things. One, I agree, John, that we need to redefine, or better, refine the numbers in the presentation. The more important part about the green vehicles, and I've been a proponent of this since we were presented with the fact that we're getting green vehicles. They are being leased. We are paying a capital lease. It should be much like the police cars. It's a capital expense. It's not an expenditure. We're not gaining, they're not an asset to us. We're writing this thing off. If we write off, it's a write-off. We don't depreciate, so it's not buying one of Link's piece of equipment that we're gonna have for 5 or 10 years. This is, the end of the lease, we make a decision whether we keep it or not. In most cases, you would, buy it. But it could be considered, much like the police, put in the operating budget, wouldn't appear here. So, I'd throw that out. I mean, I don't know. Somebody's gotta make a
Michael?
decision.
Well, and I still think we need to get to the point where we're talking about who's gonna maintain these hand-me-down vehicles that we have, and I would argue the fire chief's new car is fuel efficient by way of definition. The highway department can still work on those. So who's working on these? and what are the actual savings? We were supposed to, and I do recognize that Evan's been busy and not here now, but where's the report on what we're saving? Where's the report on what we're gonna be spending on these? And where's the report showing me that I need 10 new fuel-efficient vehicles over the next 10 years? And last year it was encumbered, so I'm assuming, and it wasn't in purchase, I'm assuming there'll be some sort of turn back in a budget to offset this, but that's another conversation. But I think we're still looking for a much bigger piece, or I'm looking for a much bigger piece to justify the expense of these. What are we saving? What is it gonna cost to repair? Who's gonna repair them when they need to be? Who's gonna take them? Because right now, I understand we're not working on these, or can't work on these.
I think we're working on off Cape as far as I understood. We asked the same question, and the answer at that time was off Cape.
I'd like to see a report with numbers on it.
Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the compound matters even further, Rich. As you point out, we can't depreciate them. I mean, we're a government. We don't wind up getting a tax benefit from that. But the thing about the leases is that we get the benefit of the federal tax credit if the dealership gets the credit and passes that along as a lower lease payment.
Exactly.
If we do not lease them, we are going to certainly pay more for them. And then in either of that scenario, you do have Michael's point to consider. It's like, where's a report that shows what it is we're spending and what it is we're saving?
We need a more defined report on the overall car piece before we.
Good news is we have the time to.
Yeah, exactly,
wait for
right,
the
which is
report.
why we're doing this.
I think I agree with Mike. I think we should have a economic justification report on the whole topic of the fleet and what we want to do with it and all that. And I just, it may or may not be a necessary decision, but we still should understand the economics of it.
Yeah, more information is better than less. So. All right, so Chris, we work on getting us a overall.
Yeah, we did submit some. We'll look at that information. I'll have Bob Lawton now. We'll go through and kind of update that material.
Okay. Any other?
Well, but the report that was given us before was comparing apples to oranges. It was comparing buying directly versus leasing, so it wasn't very useful, quite frankly. You need to bring back to the same basis to get economic, so we understand what it really means.
I'll dig the report up and we can update it.
Okay.
Michael?
Well, my comments too, back then were, what are we saving on fuel? What are we saving on mileage reimbursements, which I noticed there was something in a memo today on mileage reimbursements from somebody. The whole argument before was these cars were breaking down and people were having to tow them out of the woods and they were getting stuck. So all of that information, where is all that information? Where is the information showing us that people aren't driving their own cars as we build this fleet because they don't want to drive the hand-me-downs that we already have, that are normally just parked out back and not used?
So,
Yeah, we had some information. I think Evan did update some, and, obviously now we need to find someone to.
right, and I thought part of that conversation that we had prior to, when we talked about moving to the green vehicles, was to also, obviously, eventually get rid of those vehicles that, you're saying that sit out there. Because the point is, if we're spending money to reimburse people using their own vehicles, and, it's just costing us more and more money. So, overall, we just want to be able to make an informed decision on moving to the green cars, which is part of our green communities, but also the fact that we're going to phase these other vehicles out so that people are going to either drive them or there's no point. And if, we can't have both.
Yeah, I think the bottom line to the policy that the board adopted is that we just need to get rid of the hand-me-down Crown Vics.
Exactly, right.
There's probably about 7 of them that need to be changed out.
Right.
How we do that, there's multiple options.
Right, okay. So I would include that too, though, in that overall scenario of what we're looking at.
Madam Chair, to Michael's point too, is that, I don't know, because I haven't read the text of the lease, but are we even allowed to work on the lease electric vehicles ourselves, or is that something that they retain the right at the dealership to do?
Yeah,
I mean, those are all kinds of questions that relate to how expensive
we
it
can
is.
get the lease. My recollection, and obviously, that's a detailed question, but my recollection was that the components, tires, things that we would normally do in-house, we're entitled to do. The electric components that make the vehicle, it needs to go back to the manufacturer or manufacturer's representative. So it kind of depends. Typical maintenance can still be done. More advanced maintenance needs to go to the dealer.
I mean, similar to if you were leasing your own vehicle, right?
I think we,
Not entirely, there's no oil in these things. I mean,
No, but I'm saying, I'm saying that if you're leasing a vehicle, you're not paying for all of the maintenance on it.
Well, I think they can bring it back.
That's what,
It just depends on how the lease.
right, so let's just get the lease and let's get the overall info, so we have the level playing field of what we're evaluating and what we're gonna do with the older cars.
Second.
Thank you.
Third.
So, any other topics the board wants to move on? Are we finished with this?
Good.
Yeah,
I think so.
I think it,
if there's no other specific questions, I just wanted to make a final follow-up.
I have one question. if I
Yeah,
can.
I just meant off of the green cars.
Oh, yeah, I'm off of that.
Yeah.
I was just one of the things the board had asked me earlier, if we could try to get the warrant out a little bit sooner. So what I was gonna do is those items that have either administrative support or the support of the capital outlay committee, I will prepare the warrant articles. And what I was gonna try to do to make the warrant a little bit more manageable this year is do kind of all the capital pieces and the typical boilerplate ones that we always have, try to get that to the board by, the beginning of February, maybe similar time to the budget message. And then I think I don't remember the exact date for the citizen petitions and so forth to be submitted. But then when those come in, we can forward those. So work that we have that's progressed, where we have board votes, I will try to put into a rough warrant and get that out sooner than later. So having this blueprint, and I think what I will do, to the point, is I will, maybe working with Dana's draft or a version of this, get the sample for what it will look like in the capital outlay plan, and that way there'll be plenty of time to tweak it.
Okay. Sounds helpful.
We can get together.
I just,
Yeah, go ahead.
we've done our presentation about this plan. Fortunately, tonight, we don't have to go line by line, I hope. One of the lines that is missing, and will be discussed, is what currently is happening with Cranberry Valley and Eversource. Something around $250,000.
Yeah, I have to look at the number.
Yeah, whatever that number is, does not appear here. It certainly will make a dent in this, and that'll be discussed when we discuss it, okay? But that's missing in here, and I'm sure it's gonna pop up. And we haven't had a chance to talk about it, so.
Just to that point, not to go through all of them, but there are going to be a couple changes. Cranberry Valley, it is in litigation, that's why I've been a little hesitant about saying anything too much in terms of that. We are actively working with Eversource to try to get them to understand their obligations under their own tariffs. But in terms of, I did introduce at one of the last ones, and I think I talked about it, I did incorporate it in, the Lothrop Ave water line replacement. They had some failure, so I did include that in the plan. That had not previously been included. From my most recent conversations with the wastewater superintendent, he has indicated that he will be getting a number. In terms of that, they have been doing some exploration work on that water line. The hope is that we could actually transfer funds from another project that came in less, and then transfer that money in, so it may be a item that wouldn't affect the overall, it would just be a return of funds from another project. And I think he had money in the Lothrop Ave, I'm sorry, the Lower County Road project came in under budget, so those funds would be reallocated to do potentially this Lothrop Ave work. But I'm still in the process of getting the details from him in terms of the more precise numbers. But that's one where you could see I was carrying it to be determined in there still.
Okay.
But I think that was the only change, if you would, from the plan that has been presented previously to what's being presented now.
Yeah.
If I may, I'm hoping that we're not gonna wait until February. I'm hoping we can bring it up sooner so the board can start talking about some of these larger projects. You know, last year when we brought to the taxpayers roughly 30 million in debt exclusions that I don't believe we've borrowed yet, we did indicate to them that we were gonna try and take it easy on them. And I know things can't stop because of wastewater, but we're now asking for another, well, at least this is asking or suggesting another 7 million roughly in debt exclusions. I think we need to take a break. And I think we need to talk as a board about taking that break and giving people a little bit of relief and maybe pushing some things out to the later years where it really drops off on the borrowing. And then I know we're gonna have the budget presented fairly soon, Chris, but inevitably the budget goes up every year over 3%. And inevitably every year we raise 3 million in free cash or more that we spend, that we go shopping with, and all your free cash numbers on here. Some of the things that are on this capital plan, and they're under 50,000, so Rich, I know you guys don't vote on them, but shouldn't some of these items be budget items? I mean, extraction equipment at the town portion of only 5,000, and sorry, Norm, but it's just the first thing that came to me. I certainly would vote myself for extraction equipment. But shouldn't some of these things be in the department budgets and not being spent on free cash? And shouldn't we, as a board, be having a conversation on not managing the budget so that we end up with 3+ million in free cash? And I know Don has brought that up, but we still haven't talked about it. I think this conversation needs to start.
Yeah, we'd like to have that agenda soon so that we could do that.
But before you create warrant articles, I think maybe the board should kind of give a consensus vote on some of these things on whether or not they're gonna support them so that you're not wasting your time creating warrant articles, in my mind.
And we can add that. If we can't get it on next week, we can bring it the following week. Any other?
Jack?
Sorry, Jack.
I know we don't want to go line by line, but I'm proposing to go page by page, starting at the top of the first page. And is there anybody that wants to talk about X, Y, or Z, and then move on to the next page? Because we're running around here like we're chasing rabbits a little bit.
Okay, so does anybody have any comments on page 1?
Answer, this will be presented, if I'm not, February? When?
Yeah, but that's
Well, this has
a month
already
later.
been presented
Yeah,
officially.
Yeah.
This is really just public input opportunity on the elements of the plan.
Right, so is Jack's request to go line by line or paragraph by paragraph within that description? Or is there another meeting to discuss the plan?
Go ahead, Ed.
Well, the capital outlay plan is technically a product of the town administrator.
Right.
With your help, all of our input, whatnot. It gets presented at town meeting, and those items that are being pushed forward to be being done or funded to be completed that year are presented in any number of a series of articles. The decision on whether those articles get included in the warrant is the selectmen's decision. But to wait for sometime in February when the warrant's already been completed doesn't make sense. We need to have that discussion
I'm with you 100%.
ahead of
But
time.
there's a sheet that has requirements and dates according to the charter.
Yeah.
And all I'm saying is, are we doing the right thing by doing what we want to do today? If the charter says it's done here, I don't really care.
We'll bring it back. I mean, it's to have the discussion to.
And I would say that, we have the plan presented. What Jack is asking about, is there anything in here that's been presented that this body assembled
Yeah.
thinks we ought to have a discussion before we have to come up with an article?
And I'm happy, and
And
it's
to
fine.
do that quickly, not to debate each issue, but to quickly go through and Larry says, okay, item 15 on page 1, let's talk about that. And Don says, item 23, let's talk about that. And that's about the extent of the
Pretty close.
discussion.
As long as the capital outlay committee is not doing anything against what the charter says we have to do.
Yeah, no,
That's
we-
my only point.
Yeah, no, we thought that it would be better to start these discussions earlier,
Very
just so we could have those discussions, and if people have, particulars that, like the green cars, and we want more information, so,
That's great.
yeah,
I'm good.
so. And so to Jack's, sorry, did you?
Go ahead.
Oh,
Finish
So
it.
to Jack's point, is there particulars on each page as we go, so we at least go through it thoroughly, rather than go line by line? Are there any particular issues on this page as you go down that you'd like to call out and ask for additional information, or question the need, or whatever? So I guess I'm asking, does anybody have anything in particular on page 1 before we move on to page 2?
Yes.
Don, of course.
Well, well, you've heard about the basic subject before, but I want to delve down because this is going to be a question, regardless of how anybody feels relative to me. On the pet burial ground, if you're going to build it, and you don't go into a debt exclusion, say, we need to hear more about what it's going to take in terms of sales to be able to get to the point of spending this. Because right now, you've got this expensed out through an account that doesn't exist. Just saying, it's $131,000 posted against something that isn't there.
It's a planning document, so.
Got it, but
Plan.
somebody's going to invariably ask about that in town.
We were planning on having the cemetery director in to go over some of the materials, so we could certainly have her include that and have her in sooner than later.
That's all I have to say.
Okay. So we'll have her on the agenda again in the next couple weeks. Sorry, yep.
And apropos of what Don says, I raised the question at the time, what happens if we go into town meeting this year and the town meeting says, we don't want to be in the burial business, or we don't want to be in the, have a pet cemetery?
Oh, yeah, right.
Then what do we do?
Right.
I don't have an answer to that question,
But town meeting can take it away.
Well, not entirely.
Oh, yeah.
The town meeting turned over the administration of the pet cemetery to the cemetery commission.
Which doesn't have authority to take that authority.
I think I agree with you.
Well, if you go into Mass General Law, once you turn it over to a commission or a committee, they have to give it up before it can go elsewhere.
And if they were going to inter human remains, I would agree with you, but they were granted authority that they couldn't have under state law.
I have not seen
That was what our legal counsel told us.
Exactly, I mean, we're gonna bring this back anyway, we can
Yeah.
have that conversation when we have,
But those are the questions I'd like to have answered.
yeah, so we'll address those items when, when she's here with us, so.
Could I just say something on that one, too? I think a town meeting, a town ballot, a town voting, a crematorium, right?
The crematorium was, right.
But that's, why is that on the budget, then?
We didn't vote to remove it, we
Voted to
removed it
To
for the
postpone
time
it.
being.
No, a town ballot.
It wasn't on the ballot.
Yes, it was.
But
got
it-
torched.
But
It
it
was-
had been
it was.
voted to be
It was on the
postponed,
ballot.
It was on the
so it
ballot.
had no standing.
It was on the
No
ballot.
standing, 'cause there's no town meeting action that
I
went
agree.
with it.
Point of order! Sorry, I've always wanted to. But
Thank you, Michael.
The chair, everyone's talking over
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Well,
Michael.
one at a time.
We can't answer all this tonight anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we already said we're gonna
We'll
talk
bring it
about
back.
this when we have, cemetery here,
This
so.
was supposed to just be a broad recap of page by page.
Dana and then Larry.
Just for my committee's benefit, it is on our agenda. We meet Thursday night. We'll be talking about the capital plan some more, to be able to also go into more detail.
Thank you. Larry?
The ADA sidewalk, just for clarification on that, because numbers vary a little bit. You've got a small number in there based on our hopeful grant covering the cost of that.
Yeah, we are
Correct? And if we don't get the
trying to-
grant, then we postpone it, is that the?
Yeah, we're trying to coordinate where Matt Hart's been very instrumental in applying for community development block grant funds
I
to
just
do
want to make sure that was
sidewalk.
understood on this.
The only thing that's excluded in that is the design, so we're trying to put the design in a excluded item.
Okay.
Is that on,
The
under
30
administration?
30,000 under administration. That's simply to try to match
It
up
shows
with
up
the grant
differently, so I
dollars.
just
all right.
wanted the clarification of that. Thank you.
Anything else on page 1?
Page 2, let's see. No.
Page 2, we've already
Right
talked
there.
about golf. We've already talked about the fact that Eversource, and that's a number, and we'll have a discussion on that as well. Is there anything under fire? Okay. We've talked about golf. Harbor master. Library. Natural resources, there's nothing under here for the moment. Planning. We've got the CPC funds. Police. Anything under any one of those categories? Page 3. Public Works. Anything under Public Works?
I do have a question, and I'm sure this has come up before, but the Lower County Road Maintenance, is there any way to split that with 2 years or something to spread that out, or what's the, I know no one likes that, but is there any, do we have options on that to help us out?
Yeah, I believe that when the consultant came in, he was asked that question, Lincoln Hooper and the, his name escapes me at the moment.
They argued 1 year, I'm just arguing it.
They said it was more cost-effective to do it over 1 year instead of trying to break it into 2. But that's the reason why we kept it at the 1, is they said it was more cost-effective to do it over the,
You know
and
what
when
the
this is
difference-
one
how-
project, it's like, I think it was 3 construction seasons, so it is over a year and a half.
But it's all in one budget year then,
They
right?
count the construction season as, I think it's, you can't do construction in the summertime on roads because of the tourist nature, so I think it's the other 3 seasons that we can do work
Can I
on.
have a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
If it's over more than, you're talking about being, say, over calendar years, maybe a year, maybe
Correct.
a year and a half?
It's probably a year and a half of the project
So
itself.
could this be split off into 2 years to help us this year?
Well, don't you have to fund it?
The borrowing,
The borrowing, but you borrow it one time, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't fund it halfway.
I got it.
Ed?
In a lot of cases, you authorize the bond, it gets voted at town meeting and then at the ballot.
Yeah, no.
And then they begin the project, and typically, on a lot of projects, they'll take short-term borrowings to get them through construction, and then when you're done with the construction, you have the final dollar amount, you sell the bond to cover that. Although, the question right now, with some of these bonds going out in the future, is where do we think interest rates on bonds are going? Are they going to stay relatively the same? Then you wait until it goes. If you think it may be 2 percentage points higher, you might want to sell the bonds earlier rather than later. You know.
And under Public Works, we also have the Route 39 Pleasant Bay Road roundabout if needed. We've got 600,000 in there.
That's in 2021.
Oh, sorry, I missed the column.
Most likely that would be moved off again.
Yeah. Because it's been improved since.
There was work done in terms of, we approved the site visibility.
Right.
So there was one approach that was, more hazardous than the others. What we're trying to do, and the reason why we're just leaving it on there really as a placeholder, is to just see if
How it
we've
goes.
had the
Right.
desired effect.
Right. Michael?
In our update that we got on the 17th, it said no work will be allowed between June 15th and September 15th. The intent is the project will be constructed during 2 consecutive construction seasons, either fall, spring, or spring, fall. Chris, I asked a question that week. We get 700,000 in Chapter 90 money, plus we do an annual match of 700,000 for road work. Has it been considered to use that 1.4 million or a portion of that 1.4 million in this project, rather than in addition to this project?
I know we've had discussions. I think the response that Mr. Hooper would have is that because of the amount of mileage of roadway, he'd hate to, to take the 1.4 and do $6 million, that's almost 4 years. But to do some kind of, I understand it's some kind of hybrid approach, but I think he thinks that if we wait too long, we'll let the roads, it's too much of a hit against that 1.4 million, I think is the response I
Yeah, he did say that to us at one point when he was in front of us.
Well, just on that, I'd like to have that conversation, because I know what he'd like, but I think the taxpayers would like to see us not spend another 5.9 million on a road project this year, back to back with a bunch of other money we haven't borrowed yet. So I'd request that we have that conversation.
You mean the 5.5?
5.5.
He was in already, we can have him back.
Madam Chair?
Don?
Yeah, mine's a little more detailed than that, because this is all, everything happens in a context. I would love to see a graph about when the borrowings for the tech school and the various phases, the sewering, when the bonds are actually sold, and we incur the liability at the taxpayer level.
It is on there.
It's on the back.
Yeah, but
And we constantly update the information as the information gets updated.
again, that's what drives me nuts, because you put that on a computer screen and $1 million becomes this big. I'd love to see in a chart on a page what the dollar amount is that we'll be incurring and what that's going to do to the per thousand assessment of houses.
We haven't-
Not in a bar graph, in a narrative.
In all fairness, it has been done, and we've been doing it for the last several years. The only thing that changes is, as we know information, it goes from a planning document to a known document. Perfect example of that is on the tech school. They actually had, I think we were carrying initially 5% was they thought what they were borrowing at, and it came in at 3. I can't remember the exact number now. It came in at 3% was the borrowing rate. So as we get those accurate numbers, we are reflecting those changes in the document to make it a living document. The one significant one, which Michael had asked for, is on the restructuring of the DHY. That plan is underway in terms of what impact resequencing to do the partnership with DHY is going to have some significant value. Right now, we are carrying the original plan, and as we get those new numbers, we'll update that to reflect it. That will have a material beneficial impact.
I'm still looking at, instead of cool graphs and charts, to have a page that's got a narrative, that's a timeline narrative that has to do with, in this given fiscal year, we anticipate these following things to have this much of an impact on the tax rate in these years. And if you have to put an estimate in until it gets more precise, because we're operating in a vacuum within a given year, we have always striven for some sort of level funding, and whether it's the old version of the capital plan or the current version of it, but you can't know that you're doing that with all of these projects. And the DHY, we all agree, if we do that, we're accelerating the timeline for that phase of the sewage. So most people most people don't pay their tax bill on a graph. They pay it in terms of real money. They want to know what the impact will be on the tax rate for an average taxpayer per $1,000 before we start borrowing more money.
But I think to Chris's point is, when you're asking for that, it makes the most sense to give it to when you have more of a document that's ready to be issued, versus saying, here you go, and you're gonna go into great detail on this
But
whole
we have
chart.
to have the best information we can, because we're looking at incrementally adding to that with both the sewage and the $5 million
Right,
for the roads.
but we do have a graph to give us some information. I understand what you're saying, you'd like it more spelled out, but I think to that point, as we get closer to that point, to be able to say, we're getting real numbers.
Just, Madam Chair, in the budget message, I think almost every year I've been here, we have one graph that shows the tax impact, we have the one graph that shows the total dollar impact, and then we have that all for overtime. And so I will produce that. The only thing I have not shown is the actual borrowings. If there's 100 borrowings and 30-year schedules, I mean, it's a massive document. So, I don't think we can certainly provide that to people that want to look at it, but we are trying to simplify the information. So we do have the dollar impact, we have the tax impact, and the actual cash impact on the annual basis. It's been in my budget message each year. My frustration is I spend a lot of time putting this information out, and it just needs to be, happy to tweak it, but it is there.
Eventually, people are going to have to vote on the borrowings, and all I'm saying is, conversely, all those 5 or 10 years that you're talking about, we've been talking about things in terms of how many cups of coffee it costs you in a week. At some point or another, I'd like to reduce that down to real money, because if it turns out that we have to go out on the bond for the $5 million on the road, I'd like everybody to know what context they're doing that in, and what our recommendation is. It's going to have this effect on what we've already agreed to borrow, and you're going to have to pay this on your tax bill. We still think it's a good idea, because in another 2 years, it might cost you more. But you can't have that conversation until you know what we've already committed to. And we have committed to substantial borrowings.
Rich?
We've had extensive debate over this, and I think the easiest way, is on a debt service, that's what this is, debt service, is what we've asked, I think we've done it once or twice. What is the existing debt and what's in it? What's the and literally, if it's a gray bar and it has 7 different categories, that's the gray bar, and that's the existing debt. Then we have added debt for this year, and then we have a piece, what's the debt coming off? What did we pay for already? And that's where you see the slope going this way and the other slope, the gray getting bigger and the orange getting smaller. And with the sidebar says, this is what the gray means existing. If that helps, that might be an easier way for him to get at least an initial way to do it.
And I would say, I know where Don's going with this, as detailed as we can get in real simple numbers.
Yeah.
It's not I think the average home in Harwich was still listed at $350,000. We had several people say, we had that presentation a week and a half, 2 weeks ago on the tax rate going down 9 cents. It was exciting news. But the assessments went up 3.5% to 7%, and everyone's tax bills went up. So we need to show them as simply as we can, starting in this meeting, so the public can see exactly and as simply. Because on the last page of your document, those bars are there, I get it, but we're looking at it often. As simple as we can put it with math on there, I think makes a lot of sense, because there's 30 million that we haven't borrowed that's been authorized but not borrowed. So next year when we get our tax bills and we start borrowing that, the assessments probably will go up again.
This doesn't have DH yet.
Jack?
Rich, I got a question about one piece here. The Pleasant Lake tank fill pipe replacement for $300,000. That's something that happens every 8 or 9, 10 years, or 20 years, or what?
On the Pleasant Lake tank pipe,
$300,000.
Yeah. I believe in terms of that, and Dan Pelletier would be much more competent response, but I believe that when we went to reconfigure the water system has pumps to elevate water to a certain level and then uses pressure to go down. What he found is at the Pleasant Lake tank, that the valve itself with the pipe location isn't most optimal. So he's talking about reorienting that to try to get better use of the hydrology. So I think it's a more efficient operation that he's looking at doing.
So for that purpose, that's a one-time thing?
That would be a one-time thing, I would think. And because it would be pump or a valve, it maybe has a 20 or 30-year lifespan to it, nothing lasts forever.
And on page 2, I think it is. The housing trust, housing, $240,000. That may be a stupid question, but why is that in the capital plan?
You know, I think it goes to the question earlier about, you know, what's in and what's not. I think the intent here is, I was advised by council that I did not include CPC-related projects in the capital plan. So I was trying to take and use some of those CPC projects into the capital plan. So they had, whatever they had this year, 12 requests. So I tried to put all the requests in, just as kind of a planning document. But like on the police vehicles, you know, I tend to be, for better or for worse, you take the practices that were here before and you kind of don't necessarily change things just for the sake of changing it. But, you know, I think we need to look at the definition, and if you want just buildings and vehicles and other infrastructure in the capital plan, we can certainly do that. The idea behind this document, too, is to have it as an appendix. So if you go to town meeting and there'll be a column for articles, you can see where is every dollar being spent by the town is what we try to get to. We have to report it anyway.
Sorry.
Just a caveat from the Capital Outlay Committee is that those numbers, or that number, was voted upon only if the funding source was CPC. So much like, I mean, that.
Yeah, that's logical.
And this is all pre-vote, so we don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, as we're talking about the big picture a little bit, one of my fears on the capital plan, the way we do it with CPC, is that we don't really get a good telegraphed look of some of our orphan buildings, some of the buildings that are older and need stuff. We tend to take it as it comes up that year, knowing that we're gonna use CPC funds for it. But we don't really have on here the Sisson Road building, what's that gonna need over the next 7 years. We put in, if it's something this year, the academy, you know, if there's something this year, we put it, but we don't really telescope out what is coming on those buildings, what they're gonna need over a 7-year plan. No matter how it's gonna be funded, we should at least be able to reflect those somehow.
Madam Chair. We go basically into hiatus from town meeting to like September. In that time period, one of the recommendations that we made to Chris was that we get the, what's his name, the new guy?
Sean Libby.
Sean Libby to come in and actually, what are the assets, what's the condition, and exactly work with you guys to figure out what's it gonna cost in future years, and what is called, it's not worth it, kind of thing. And that's the evaluation that we will go into in the spring. So that will be covered.
Madam Chair?
Yep, okay.
Page 1, faculty maintenance. The highway barn metal roof, $260,000. Aren't we talking about possibility of demolishing that building?
This is the highway barn metal roof.
Which barn is, that's over, that's another one.
This is the one that is,
Salt shed?
Next to the office.
by the
Next to
office.
the
Yeah, this is one that's by the office.
Okay, all right.
It's rusting out.
All right,
There's no
The walls
insulation.
were replaced, but the
walls are,
roof was
but
not.
the roof was not.
thank you.
We have a highway bond roof guy on our committee, and he
No.
did it for a living before he retired. And he went out and looked at it for us.
They put them on a lift.
Ed?
We replaced the roof in the highway barn a bunch of years ago, but it's a metal roof, and they tend to rest out, but they're much more economical than reconfiguring it to take a shingle roof, to just replace the metal every 10 years, if that's the replacement schedule.
Okay.
Just, Madam Chair, on the orphan building, I just want to give Sean Libby some credit that, you know, once the selectmen voted to have the cultural center go for 6 years, he did put together a capital budget that goes out over that 6 years. So, you know, we are looking, and I think the next horizon, if you would be to look at all the orphan buildings and try to put together a more comprehensive plan on those.
All right, thank you. Angelo?
Thank you. Just a question, as I listen to everybody dealing with individual items, it'd be a lot easier to do that if we knew what the totals were gonna come out to be. You know, if you look at the total on what we theoretically would be paying on capital items, it shows like $12 million this year. And if you look at some of the other information that Chris has presented to us, that number is also higher on the regular budget. So when you add them all together, there's going to be a pretty good in-size increase in what our taxes are going to be next year. So if indeed that is true, then maybe we need to go through every one of the capital items and see what we could possibly move a year or so. But if it's not a problem with our total budget, I think every department has put in what they think are good and necessary projects. So rather than just taking a quick shot at them, I think we have to know how much money we should be trying to pick up. I personally think that we probably need to change some of the things we're doing or planning to do next year and maybe putting them in the following year. But you only want to do that if you know that the budget and this total are going to raise their taxes.
Well, I think it's also an opportunity, though, to have that discussion about the various projects and to try to get a jump start on, you know, if there's certain items that we think we can table and we can collectively talk about that and learn more about them, then it's a great opportunity to talk about it now than in February, so.
Yeah, I'm just saying that if we're spending $5 or $6 million more than we spent last year, or $10 million more, you have a whole different attitude towards what you're taking out.
I understand what you're saying.
That's all I'm trying to say.
Right, no, and I agree, I understand.
And we need that number, which we don't have.
Some of them, right, we don't have everything. Ed?
Well, and by having the discussion earlier, we can decide if there are some changes on how we want to approach a project and get that reflected in the article.
Yeah, I understand that.
That gets turned in because, you know, our articles are due. This is from our bylaw. All articles to be inserted in the May town meeting shall be submitted in final form. So you don't get to sort of rewrite it sometime in March. We've got to make that decision by the 12 noon on the second Friday in February.
Well,
So
I
we
understand
need to
that, but
have-
I still think you need to be provided with a tight estimate of what the numbers are going to be for next year, now, not 6 months from now.
Just,
Go ahead.
and real quick, you got $7 million of borrowing, okay? It's I would think, I want to know what's coming off before I put it on.
That's
okay?
true.
So,
That's-
once Chris can give us the debt service number that's coming off, and you're putting on 7, if you're dropping 5, your net is 2.
Right.
That may make a difference, I don't know.
That's what I was looking for.
And I agree, with the exception of it's 37 million going on if we pass this, because we haven't put the other 30 million. But I want to know the dropping off debt as well.
Okay,
Anything else?
move on.
Should I, we done talking about it?
Are we done? Because we have another public.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll close the
Close your-
public hearing on the capital plan. And as we do that, I just want to thank Rich and that committee for the work that they have done all year for.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And
Chris,
Angela.
Chris is, since he didn't take that position earlier.
Yeah, that's. Do you have to close your meeting? Do you have to close your?
Yeah, we're all set.
adjourn?
We're
Okay.
we good.
You adjourn your meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any, no?
I adjourn my.
My head is gonna explode.
Give my regards to Joanne. She had to hang around for me so she could drive you home.
If you rush, Rich, you can get home and still see us on TV.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're, I mean, I'm in favor of it.
I'm not moving.
because I'm on the planning board.
Okay, good. Come sit next to me then.
Oh.
I get laid off this week.
The other Joe is here.
You need also to differentiate.
Okay, so we're now going to move on to the joint meeting with the planning board to discuss the draft single-family dwelling with accessory apartment zoning bylaw. So, good evening, Jim. Good, how are you? Right, you're going to call your meeting to order?
Yep, I'd like to call the joint meeting of the Harwich Planning Board and Board of Selectmen to order. We've already read the notice, so I'm not going to repeat that, so. We have the topic is the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. Single-family dwelling with accessory apartment. And we may have this discussion and a possible vote.
Right, thank you. Larry, did you want to?
Yeah, I have a few things to question on this, but the first one I have is the easiest one. That is that you have the accessory department that's for no less than 6 consecutive months. I wonder if people providing rooms, say for summer help, whether that's too long, whether something, say 3 or 4 months would make sense.
You know, we had that discussion. I think we're looking, Larry, more for some guidance on that. I mean, I don't know that we can just say it's 3 months, 6 months without some input from some folks, so.
I would share that. I raised it because I was looking at the
Yeah.
other side of that.
If they're here for the summer, it's a quarter, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that makes good sense.
Let me, hold these in the packet. Madam Chair, if I have a moment, I'd like to explore another broader topic, and that is the accessory apartments comes in conflict in some sense to our CWMP, our net zero nitrogen reduction goals. Because at the same time, we're asking to increase affordable housing and actually, in some cases, apartments in general where it makes sense, we get stymied because we have a zoning that is based on Title V.
Yes.
In those areas that are sewered. And there are some, and those have been written in a way that seem just black and white. And they're not exactly. There's some leeway there. And I would point out that we have a land control policy that says that we can increase the flow in one area if we take off the flow somewhere else. And I'll just, let me just preface this, is that there's two committees and areas involved with that. One is the planning board, which we're talking about tonight. The other one is the Board of Health, because they're saying in nitrogen regulations. And so, in that sense, I'd like to, just to, at the beginning, ask that this not be finalized till we have some input from the Board of Health on the nitrogen regulations. And I would, for instance, Falmouth, let me just read you a couple items from that some of our neighboring towns have done. This is Falmouth. They put in their accessory apartment regulations that a lot of this, but the number of bedrooms should not exceed 1 per 10,000 square feet. That's, we all have that. Unless the principal dwelling and accessory apartment are connected to the municipal sewer system, which gives them a leeway. Chatham has the same buildup, the same criteria in their bylaws for accessory apartments. Now, Chatham specifically then points towards a nitrogen regulation bylaw or regulation from the Board of Health, which they've worked out to say they're connecting to a sewer, and if you have an established CWMP in which you can have a land control policy, you can have a leeway to then put add another bedroom in the zoning area. So that allows us to offer increased housing that we're all after and still keep tracking within our CWMP.
Yes.
And I think that has to be worked out. And I don't want to get in too much of the weeds here, but just one more comment. I lost my sheet of paper. I did ask for some guidance from the Cape Cod Commission and DEP. And they point out to me that this is actually really unusual from state government, actually, that we have flexibility. And it says the full neutral requirements were intended to provide towns with flexibility regarding the allocation of wastewater flow with respect to town priorities. And then they go into some of the examples on this. And I think one misnomer is, and this may have been due to a policy that the board did a couple of years ago on the Title V regulations, is that the flow neutral is based not simply on our Title V capacity now, but what it is in our CWMP build-out.
Where it will be.
Where it will be.
Correct.
And we have right now in the Pleasant Bay watershed, we have our current build-out will give us over 200,000 GPD per gallons per day.
Yep.
Our build-out is actually at almost 300,000. Now, that's an interesting point because it does give us some room to build and take into account adding some accessory apartments or, where it's necessary in these areas. The 300,000 is important because that's what we signed up for with the Chatham.
Yes.
For total capacity. So we were foresighted enough to sign up for enough capacity in Chatham to give some of this flexibility. So what I'd like to suggest to you is, if I can send you, and you can look it up yourself, but I can save you some time. I can send you the wording that we have. I found a couple. And I think Brewster has something as well in their guidelines.
Yep.
And their nitrogen regulation. See if I've been asked to present my case to the Board of Health on Wednesday night.
Yep.
To bring them into this whole discussion. See, I think to move forward on what I hope would be a working together on how we best move ahead using the sewer capacity we have to advantage and do it in a responsible way. If you guys do it, if a planning board does it on a spatial case, and we're not becoming low Manhattan, we're not suggesting, growth goes crazy.
Yep.
You can monitor that, but provide some flexibility to give the planning board, you folks tonight, an option to use the flexibility we have available to help us out.
Yep. No problem with that, Larry. I mean, look, I'm for responsible growth too, and I think one of the things that we learned a few years ago is, we've got this great watershed that we're sitting on, and we want to make sure we're growing responsibly, so it's not just the effluents, but it's what's going into the air as well. And then the other waste too, that goes into the ground. So those are all points well taken and very much appreciated. Thanks. Mary?
If I could, Mr. Chair, just one clarification. One of the main changes in this proposal from what exists already is really the going by a matter of right versus special permit. So we currently do have the special permit, and we of course don't have any say in the septic. So Board of Health gives us those approvals before we act on them anyway. So just in this instance, the as of right makes it a little bit easier for applicants to come and get their accessory apartment unit. And just as a follow-up to your comment about the months, the 6 months we had talked about in an earlier iteration of this in prior years, only because it has been suggested by others as a way to really increase our workforce housing, in that if it's greater than 6 years, you're going to get likely get a year-round versus having an Airbnb situation where somebody's going to keep turning them over. So.
Fair enough. I get that. I would like to if it's possible, use this opportunity to put in the wastewater, the sewer issue if we can, so specific, gives you an item for people to consider when they come to you, so they understand it.
The only thing I would say about that is that I think obviously we do need to have that input.
Yeah.
But we also have some time sensitivity to getting it on the warrant. So we need to be careful on that time frame.
It has to go very quickly.
Yeah, so we'll make sure that we get it back and, get clarification and get it back in the next, couple
Yeah,
weeks.
when do you need it? Soon?
Yeah.
Like tomorrow?
Yeah, I would say it would be nice to have it either by the 14th or the 21st, correct?
Yeah, we have a meeting tomorrow night, so.
Board of
Health input, though.
It'll take
Don?
us-
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to take the opportunity to thank you guys for producing what you have produced. Larry's on to something, but the point is, through the years, we changed the zoning. I was on the planning board in the 90s when we changed the zoning in Harwich Port. That didn't mean that everybody was going to be able to start building top-of-the-shop accessory apartments because there were other jurisdictional issues in other places. You only have the part that you have. And you can only deal with what you can deal with. Ironically, Larry, we're the sewer authority. And eventually, if we pipe something, it passes from the Board of Health back to the sewer authority. These folks don't have any jurisdiction in that. And there's another stakeholder, the Department of Environmental Protection and the Drinking Water Resource Protection District also is a stakeholder. They've provided us with what we've asked them for. And actually, I'm grateful that they did it. It looks like a really good document.
No, it looks like a great document, but to Larry's point, there's one clarification that would be helpful to have. If you're sewered in the Water Resource Overlay District, it may be a non-issue, so you shouldn't be restricted. You shouldn't have to have a minimum of 40,000 square feet if you're sewered.
And in point of fact, some of these houses might actually wind up deleting a bedroom to add it to the accessory apartment, so it would become rental. So that's no net change at all.
Well, you can't have more than 2 bedrooms.
And that's the part that could change though with it.
Right, that could change some.
But we need this is a puzzle, and we have these folks who are this part of the puzzle. They can't do any more than what they can do. is what I'm saying.
No, there I disagree with you. Is that, because I've looked at these other towns, the zoning that has indicated it's possible if it ties in with the Board of Health. Yeah, what I'm trying to do is figure out how we pull the puzzle together to make it happen.
But again, my problem with that is, once the pipe goes in, the Board of Health's input on that particular area goes away, and it becomes a sewer issue.
Right, they're going to look
The
to
Board of Health
us.
only has jurisdiction when you're sinking a Title V in the backyard. So they
Well,
can
no-
contemplate language that says, in accordance with all applicable regulations, that here's what we're giving you. But they're not in the particular business of being able to govern sewage flow.
Let me send some language and see what you think of it.
Well, and let me comment on that, because in Chatham, if you are connected to the sewer and you have not increased your bedrooms, you can go and request one. That does go through the Board of Health, but to your point, ultimately bounces back to the selectmen to make that decision.
But it goes
So,
to the Board of Health. A lot of things come to us after it goes somewhere else
there
first.
is a
It goes
process.
to the Board of Health first. Actually, steps zoning, Board of Health, selectmen. What I'm trying to do is simplify the puzzle.
Right. And the planning board has done a ton of work on this, so we truly appreciate
Yeah, it's
you,
been a
you've done
great job.
great work in a short period of time. And ultimately, it's great to be able to move in the direction that we've seen other towns move in, which is to make it simple, or more simple in that sense. So,
I think, Madam Chairman, in the long run, maybe not this year or next year, but in the long run, you're going to have a water and sewer commission. In other words, as they continue to sewer the community. Community I used to live in, we started out with just a water department, privately owned, by the way, and eventually put it together as a water and sewer commission as we sewered the town. I mean, we're talking 25 years by the time we're at the other end of town here.
40 years.
40 years.
We'll be around, Joe.
Right.
You're
No,
around.
I don't know about you and I.
Ed?
So this is an amendment, basically, of our zoning ordinance to allow as of right, a by right accessory apartments. And so we're amending our current zoning. And so I start reading this, and it, starts out 325-51, and it's the single-family dwelling with accessory is all contained under H in that section. And item 1 is pretty much the same. There may be some tweaks from what's in the existing item 1. And the definition's the same. And then you get to the first area where there's significant changes, and it's number 3, and it says criteria for by right an accessory apartment within an existing single-family dwelling structure is allowable by right, provided the criteria pursuant to 325-51.H4 are met. And so I go, okay, what are those? Well, the 4 underneath is the criteria for a special permit. It doesn't say what the criteria for a by right approval is.
It's above in the,
Where?
there's the other piece up here.
It's for detached, isn't it?
Where?
With by right, criteria for by right, an accessory apartment within an existing single-family dwelling. Structure is allowable by right, provided the criteria pursuant to 325-51H4 are met. Then down below,
But
One's
that's-
within and one's detached.
But that's listed as criteria for a special permit, not
no,
criteria.
sorry, and then below, I thought, hold on,
That's
H.
detached.
Yeah, but
There
it's
should be a definition for.
Yeah, there should, you're right.
Yeah,
detached.
Yeah,
there's
you're
something
right.
missing there, because,
So define by right and
Yeah.
special permit.
yeah,
No, and the
Define
reference.
what it covers.
Right, the reference.
One's
it covers.
detached, one's
Yeah,
in
he's
the
right.
house.
yeah, okay, and then.
But it says that.
And then you go down later in section 3, or, parentheses 3, and it says, the building commissioner shall determine compliance with said criteria upon the application for a change in use for said accessory apartment. In addition, the accessory apartment within an existing single-family dwelling structure shall comply with 324-51.H6 and 7. Well, I can't find
They're on the next page.
Next page.
320.
If you flip it over, it's on the back page.
You can, right here. 6, transfer of ownership, and 7.
Okay, but I can't find the 324. And is that a,
That might be a typo.
That might be
okay,
a typo.
okay. So I went nuts trying to find the
Yeah.
324.
That's 5 years, I mean, it should
I'm
be
Wrong
6.
number.
I'm fairly sure that's incorrect,
Okay,
but
good.
that's a good catch.
Yeah, and I was looking at the old one, and there is no section 324 anywhere. And then I looked, so anyway,
Yeah, it's all-
okay.
When you're close to it, sometimes you don't see it, but it's a
Yeah,
good catch.
yeah.
And that, that speaks to the work, I think, that this group has done, that the planning board has done with these other groups, because, we have multiple sets of eyes on this, and
But, that issue with the criteria for a by right approval and the criteria for by right approval and criteria for special permit approval ought to be specifically listed out and separated.
Yeah.
And even if it means that you're duplicating a lot of verbiage and have to come up with a different section, but they should not be trying to be contained in the same, subsection, because then it just gets confusing.
so we failed by being too simple. So we can fix
Never
that.
too simple.
Yeah,
We can fix that, that's not a problem.
That's easy.
Michael?
What was the conversation about by rights for detached? Did you have a lengthy conversation about that? Why aren't we considering detached?
Why are we or why
Why
aren't?
aren't we? Why isn't, by matter of right, why isn't detached being considered?
You know,
I think that's
Yeah.
because it becomes a secondary dwelling issue, and it becomes a zoning-related issue, so you can't do it by right necessarily,
So,
I
I would
think.
say that I'd say to check with other towns. Both Falmouth and Brewster are doing detached by right.
As is Truro.
As is Truro. And I would ask that we run this by our current housing consultant that we just hired, Chris, to ask if they actually think that this is gonna produce units. I know in the town of Brewster, there's a line of people waiting for them to finish it, because they wanna do it.
Yeah.
And I know that there are people that are interested. They had a lot of public input in that town, but I'd like to at least consider it by right detached if we can. And I think that if it's detached, we're gonna have a lot more people that are gonna wanna use this, and we are gonna create housing stock.
Anything, Mike, that we can do to increase the number of
We might have to phase that so that you can get something on the warrant this year, because you'll need additional public hearings.
I mean, I could get you Brewster's, as much information as you want on Brewster's if you wanted to review it. I know you can with a phone call too, but they've done a lot of this work.
Yeah.
They've led a pretty strong effort on affordable housing, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Madam Chair,
So,
I know our housing coordinator was incredibly involved in developing the by right ordinance in Truro and getting it approved.
Who's that?
Part of the
Jay.
city.
I knew
Jay
The
Colburn.
consultant.
Jay Colburn.
Yeah,
Can we
just
get,
hired
Chris,
him.
can we get Jay to get in touch with the planning board, or Charlene?
Jay
Yeah.
Coburn.
Yeah, he's,
I know Jay.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
we all know Jay.
Yeah, he's on our,
Yeah, so, I mean, again,
So-
like, you would, if we're gonna move in that
you would
direction,
recommend that we talk to Jay?
we need to have public
And
hearings.
Brewster.
So we need
Okay.
public hearings,
Yeah.
so that's, I
The
know
hearing
Sha-
can actually happen later. They have to have the final language done. But we have always,
Yeah, typically, the public hearings on a proposed zoning amendment happens in April.
Shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, I
they
don't
have
know, if I mean, that could be correct, but Charlene had indicated previously that we needed to get ahead of this, I believe, in a public hearing. I could be wrong. I'm just saying, let's be sensitive to the fact that if we do need public hearings, let's make sure.
there is a
we have
timeline
it.
because you gotta advertise it two
Right,
successive
that's what I'm
weeks and
saying.
all
You
that.
gotta advertise it, and you have to
But
have
it
the
does not have to
feedback.
be done before the warrant's closed.
So.
There is
But-
time.
But typically, the planning board presents a zoning amendment as an article, and at some point in late March or April, we refer it back to them to hold the public hearing.
Well, no, that's
Because
great
i-
if we don't have it, but,
Because once you open the public hearing, then it triggers some ability of people to come in and put in applications to sort of obviate some of the possibilities of
I
what
don't
you're
know,
trying to
I just know
correct.
that when we were talking about this, getting this on the warrant, we needed to. Mary?
At this point, this is the time that we can change it,
Yeah.
because
now.
we haven't had the full public hearing. It becomes tricky once we go to the planning board public hearing
Yeah.
and publish it for 2 weeks, then it
And
becomes
switch
difficult
it, right.
to
So-
make changes.
Like, let's
So-
get it.
Okay, Craig?
A
has
question to the
Craig,
board,
yeah.
just for clarification. The consultant, the housing consultant that you recommended, is that part of his or her consultant role to the town of Harwich, or?
We have to pay him.
That's my point, does that fall
to
under,
represent the trust.
under
He's
his
part of
umbrella?
the-
for
Yes,
the-
he's part of the trust, and he's working with
Okay.
us to try to identify additional housing resources, so.
Joe, is there
Just so there's no
Joe.
surprises.
Just one quick comment. My sense is that when we finally do this, the volume of these that happen are going to be on properties from 28 to the water, all along that part of town. Now, somebody else might disagree with that, but that's where I think, in other words, I'm Johnny Jones, I own a piece of property with a garage, and I want to be able to rent it out. It's very rentable down there, so I follow this and rent it out.
But I would say also, a lot of those people who would have that are already doing that by special permit. They're already getting those accessory
I
dwelling
think a lot of them are doing it. I don't think they
Or
have special
well,
permit.
maybe not all by special permit, but those who are trying to do it and rent it are doing it by special permit, because, trust me, I know, because we deal with that all the time. So people are filing special permits if they're not allowed by right. And, you know, to your point, are you gonna have more of those? Maybe, but those people who might have those waterfront properties in that area of town are probably already looking at that. And some of that is just the problem, again, we face, is that they're not renting it. It's for their family, and then they don't use it but 2 weeks out of the year. So it goes kind of full circle on what the issue is back to not having housing, but having those spaces. So, and I think to the point of the months and the restrictions, we have to be careful about that. To Larry's point, if it's summer housing, it's for 8 weeks, 10 weeks. So, I mean, in some cases, when you have international students and they're traveling abroad, to come here to work, they got maybe 12 or 14 weeks. But we have others that are getting 8 or 10 weeks, so we have to look carefully at that as well.
Well, I think,
We'll be back.
I'm not sure we wanna, we've gotta look at what's
Right.
really fair.
Right.
Does anyone else have any questions
Any
or
other-
concerns about what we're doing?
Oh, great job.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the
Do you
effort.
want to adjourn your meeting?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the,
Second.
you second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Madam
Again,
Chairperson.
for all your work. Michael?
Julie, if you don't mind, I'd like to try and push B up in new business. Judy Wilson tried to speak at the beginning
Oh,
of the
yeah,
meeting,
sure.
and we didn't think it was gonna go till 9:20.
No,
but I'd like to
yeah.
take B ahead.
Yeah,
and
no,
allow
that's
them to go
fine.
home. Chris or Julie, maybe you could just start it anyway. I know she wants to read a letter that's in our packet, but maybe just explain it.
You want to give the overview, or?
It's not, I'm not going to write I'm not reading the letter, I'm reading something else, if that's okay. Just to introduce myself again, I'm Judy Wilson, and I'm the daughter of Jane Bretsky of 61 Azalea Drive, and I'm speaking on her behalf. My mother is the subject of the letter requesting a dangerous dog hearing, which you'll deal with in a minute. But since it appears that the hearing will be held in potentially a less public venue, I wanted to share a little bit about my family's experience regarding the process and not the incident. We'll save comments about the incident for the hearing. But as elected leaders of the community, we want you to know a little bit more about our experience. If a neighbor had assaulted my mom, causing the injuries that she sustained, they would have been charged with assault. But apparently, if a neighbor's dog does it, it's acceptable. At least that's how it's felt to us. We would have expected that the animal control officer would want to know about my mother's injuries. We would have expected that we would have been informed of the status of the animal's vaccinations, including rabies. We would have expected to be informed of what would happen at the end of the 10-day mandatory dog quarantine. We would have expected to be able to speak with a law enforcement supervisor about our frustration. My mother was hurt badly, and the emotional and physical injuries have been traumatic. But the response from the authorities has also been traumatic. I contacted the police department multiple times for help, by phone, by email, and in person. Because of every other contact I've ever had with the police department here, I had every reason to believe I would receive help. But if our experience is any indicator, it seems that there may not be any formal procedures for oversight and review in situations like what happened to my mom. If we're correct, then something is terribly wrong with the process. And if there is oversight, then something went terribly wrong with the process, because we felt that we had no help. Even after writing our letter, we have heard nothing about any of those expectations that I mentioned earlier. Some years ago, my father, who is now deceased, completed the Citizens Police Academy and then volunteered for the Harwich Police Department and the Council on Aging, putting house numbers up around town to improve public safety. And all I can think about is how incredibly disappointed and upset he would be about all of this. My brother, who is himself a police officer, is also upset about this, as am I, who used to work for the town. My Honestly, we expected better. We didn't go to Facebook and create a public outcry, and believe me, I'm hoping that you saw the pictures because we sent them with the letter. Everybody who has seen the pictures is outraged. We didn't fill this room tonight, and we could have done that as well. Instead, I'm here to continue to try and do the right thing. Shouldn't expectations be high when it comes to the safety of a 79-year-old widow who lives alone in our community for nearly 22 years? I would hope that in matters of public safety, you would want better for your residents, for people like my mother. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, did you want to go ahead to the?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I read the material myself, went through it, and obviously I was disturbed as the administrator in the community by the treatment. Two things, though. One, obviously, as a hearing officer, which is being recommended here, I will keep an open mind and listen to both sides relevant to the incident. So as a hearing officer, I'll follow the necessary elements under Chapter 140. I've done a couple of them since I've been here. As the administrator, I have already had some initial discussions with some of the police leadership to get a sense for, what's going on and what happened. So I believe under the charter, I have the ability to or through the board, do an investigation into a matter and then look into it. And, before I make any judgment either way, I want to make sure I get the facts so that they can be presented to me. But I will reach out to the police department and go through with them, and I'm happy to meet with Judy as well, just to go through. But I think this is one where it's almost under the powers of investigation to make sure, what did we do right, what did we do wrong, and how can we improve that? So I'm more than willing to do that as a second component to the, in addition to the dog hearing.
Yeah, and I guess to Judy's comments as well as, what exactly is the process in the sense that, they should be getting some type of notification on all of these steps.
Right, on the 10-day quarantine and so forth.
Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to follow on what Julie was saying. Nothing is prejudicial in answering some of the central questions about the vaccinations and a bunch of other of these issues. They can happen in parallel. You don't have to wait for an answer. I think that regardless of, especially with what we're seeing, regardless of what is going to be the ultimate outcome of this, she needs some answers, and she needs them pretty soon. So, I mean, that should be the first focus. I don't care about the process as much as the answer.
I'll do both in parallel. If I didn't make that clear, I'm making that clear now, I guess. I will do both in parallel, to look at the issue of our response and to then do the dog hearing.
But the third issue is those things that can be answered, like vaccinations and stuff, need to get prompt information to them. I mean, they deserve that. Even if everything else wound up being a horrible accident and it's not a vicious dog, they still need to know that there was something that didn't happen physically that's transcendent to that one incident.
Judy, did you want to speak?
I just, two points, thank you, Mrs. Chairman. The process is really important. I mean, the dog is not in quarantine any longer. We have still no information. The fact that you're asking questions is wonderful, but where's the communication with my family? This is horrible. I mean, it's a disgrace, honestly. That's the word my mother's using. It just really doesn't feel good. And the process is important, irregardless of everything else. And why we don't have any information about the vaccinations at this point, when the quarantine has ended and we've seen the dog being walked in the neighborhood, is just reprehensible. I'm sorry.
Michael?
If I may, first and foremost, I want to apologize on behalf of the town, at least for me, for what you've gone through. Second, Chris, Don said it. I don't see anything more important than getting this information. And I think we're going to have you do this, but this incident happened December 22nd, and if it wasn't put on the selectmen's agenda for tonight, too much time has already passed. And if this was my mother, I can't tell you what I would have done. And I think everybody needs to think of everyone involved, including us. I really want to know the answer as to why this took so long to come before us. and why this woman's living in that neighborhood with a dog that's running around, and she can't leave her house in fear of being bit. So I'd like to see this happen and happen fast.
Well, and I think that overall, I'm not gonna speak for the board, but I think that we all feel that way. We saw the pictures, they're terrible, and none of this should have been dealt with in a lengthy manner. It all should have been very quick, very exact. You should have had all the information you needed immediately. And certainly, I mean, it sounds like there was a previous incident, now we don't know the details of that. But again, we need, I would agree and concur that we need information quickly, precisely, and I think we need to have some type of process written in front of us of all the ways that the dog officer and the police are gonna deal with these incidents, because this isn't the way I would want anybody treated in town, myself included, so. Ed, do you have any comments?
Well, I know of other situations that have happened in the town, and not always has the outcome happened similarly, but it's never been a smooth process, and it needs to be much smoother, because people need to have their questions answered. My own daughter last fall was bit by a dog in Dennis, and she wound up going through the rabies treatment because they couldn't get the vaccination records out in time. And it's better be safe than sorry, but you know, they're not fun things to go through.
Right. Michael?
Can we just agree that the chair get notified within the next 24 hours, Chris, of what's going on as far as hearings go? I don't believe this family should have their mother, or anyone in that neighborhood should have this dog running around while we have a dangerous hearing and then vote on it a week from now or 2 weeks from now. It should happen now, right now. So I will make a motion to authorize the town administrator to hold a dangerous dog hearing under Chapter 140, Section 157, relative to dog attack, and report back on the findings and recommendations.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
I would like to amend that, in the interim, that he gets any information that is pertinent to her personal health to her immediately, not waiting for
I'll do
that.
the vaccination
I think
before.
that's-
I legally may have to
That was
provide
part of my
notice.
motion.
I think that's understood.
That was part of
That
it.
that was, I understood that.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
And our apologies, Judy, and our best to your mother.
Thank you.
Okay, appointment of Greg Winston as, new business. Appointment of Greg Winston as a full member of the Harwich Center Initiative Committee.
I move that we appoint Greg Winston as a full member of the Harwich Center Initiative Committee with a term to expire, Don?
December 31st, 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in any further discussion?
No.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Under new business, we have
We
this
had to add.
amendments.
Yeah.
So, Madam Chair, I had brought up at the beginning of the meeting that we had received a email from the office of the governor that outlined that on the governor's desk was signature, but his legal assistant is asking whether the bill with the 3 changes outlined below conforms to the town's intent. I see where the Board of Selectmen meeting Monday night and could bring this up under a matter not reasonably foreseeable to have the board approve the changes. Just as a reminder to folks that there were 3 businesses in the community that have seasonal licenses, and they seek to have their liquor licenses converted from seasonal to year-round. And that came in the form initially of House Bill 4932. House Bill got updated to 4956, which is what was voted by the legislature, and then is now sitting on the governor's desk. Let me see.
Which version of that, just as a point of information? This version?
Yes. So the one that was sent to us via the fax, and just the scope of the changes, it just, instead of saying issue 3 additional liquor licenses, they said grant 3 additional licenses for the sale of alcoholic beverages to be drunk on premises. So they just used the specific wording in the statute of Chapter 138. The other elements is just they put in Town of Harwich, And then in some areas, they just put in street, instead of putting ST, they put street in, and they put in the more specific definitions. But I think Attorney Giorgio had sent this, they had reached out to him, House Counsel, and that, he characterizes this as administrative or not typos necessarily, but just clerical type changes that could be approved by the board. But he wanted the board to make sure that they had an opportunity to go through that and to specifically vote. I think we did put in the packet a draft letter that says something to that effect, that the board has reviewed the material and agrees that it's still within the substance of the original article at town meeting.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the marked up version of the language and send that letter to the governor.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
We've already done.
Under contracts?
Yeah, contracts. Contract to receive Executive Office of Elder Affairs Formula Grant Funds for FY 2019 in the amount of $55,548. Authorize the town administrator to sign. Michael?
Move that we approve the contract to receive Executive Office of Elder Affairs Formula Grant Funds for 2019 in the amount of $55,548 and authorize the town administrator to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Old business? None. Town administrators
All
report.
business is old at this point.
Way old.
Yeah, I'll make this quick, Madam Chair, just due to the hour. Just in terms of, we did receive on December 27th, the official, actually, you had a letter that came in, congratulations on the town of Harwich being designated as a green community. One of the values of that, actually, it was a little bit off, $152,910 is the grant award. And then that does allow us to continue to apply for grants moving forward. So it has two effects, one immediate and one eligibility on an annual basis. It does require, and we will look at installing these, that we get signs installed for green communities to be located in 4 different locations. And we'll have that certificate posted here in the building. So just to, I guess that's kind of a finalization, if you would, of the town's efforts to become that. And obviously, I appreciate all the staff work that went into that, and obviously the board's support to get that designation. That was no small task, actually, as time went on.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. The other 2 items, just on contracts, I have been trying to just give the board a sense for some of the things that are coming in. We had 3 phases of the townwide radio system. This is the individual portables that we have throughout. Phase 2 came in at $13,857. So it came in at a lesser amount than was anticipated. So just wanted to let people know that that project is coming to a conclusion. On the Station 2, there was geotechnical work that was being done to support. Certainly the contractor can't do his own testing and things of that nature, so we had to contract that out. That was consistent with the budget that was out there for Fire Station 2. The amount of that is $12,650. And then last, was kind of alluded to a little bit in the meeting earlier, but certainly there's times in an organization where you bring people in and you anticipate, based upon the interview, that you have a person that is going to be a good fit and able to accomplish what the mission is of the office and of the administration. I didn't believe that Evan was doing that, so I did extend his probationary period in an effort to try to see if we could effectuate change. And unfortunately, I just didn't see enough to warrant his continued employment with the organization. So he did not survive his probationary period. Certainly regrettable, but it's a difficult time to have to make those decisions. In the meantime, I have, Bob Lawton has agreed to come in once again. Bob is a former administrator who is retired and has kind of become a jack of all trades. So Bob actually started today to render some assistance. We are having some significant staff challenges in the office with people. So now we normally run with 4, and we have 2, and then with Bob's assistance, we'll have, 2 plus Bob, myself being one of those 2, and then Sandy in the office. And I do want to just kind of publicly thank Sandy that she has been just really a solid person and individual to help through some of these kind of difficult times that sometimes we have in the office setting. So just to alert the board that we will be advertising for the assistant position, and certainly if anyone knows of anyone that has an interest, please feel free to have them contact me so we can try to fill that position as timely as possible. And that concludes my report this evening, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chris. I need a motion. Oh, sorry, was.
I was gonna be a wise guy, just ensure that we're not paying for Bob's divorce payments when he works here.
It's wintertime, he's fine. The boat's shrink wrap.
Okay, excuse me for that comment. Nothing, no.
Michael. Ed?
Just a comment in the approval of the testing company for the Fire Station 2 project. It occurs to me that it's the same testing company that we had on the Monomoy Regional High School, and through his testing foundation design, we saved a fair amount of money. So this is I think we wound up with one of the best in the area. Congratulations, Chief, on that. Good.
And Larry's too modest to say this, but we were at the COA volunteer recognition luncheon this past week, and we have a whole bunch of people in this town who volunteer to make things happen that we could not possibly make happen if it was just budgeted. So we thank them all.
Thank you. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Thanks. We're adjourned.